Chapter 1803. Unity of Sword and Martial Arts. This is definitely the realm of unity of sword and martial arts. Nie Tian came to his senses and couldn't control himself as he exclaimed. Sakra Heaven's sword intent was so strong, and it was so natural that he could completely control the sword intent. Only a swordsman at the peak of the god realm, who had fused sword and martial arts into one, could achieve this. His guess was right. The current Di Shi Tian was the one who fused sword and martial arts into one. Sword and martial arts as one, the sword realm at the peak of the immortal realm. The martial artist and the sword intent became one. At this moment, the sword artist was the martial artist, and the martial artist was the sword. Di Shi Tian's physical body was reconstructed and he obtained a new life. Although his martial body was a little young and his strength had not recovered to its peak, his sword Dao realm was perfectly preserved. The realm of sword and martial unification. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan also reacted, and cried out in alarm in unison. Their faces were filled with shock. Nie Tian, Di Shi Tian isn't just an ordinary sword and martial fusion, he's at the legendary realm of sword and martial fusion. Fat Cat couldn't help but laugh complacently when she saw Nie Tian and the others' shocked faces. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't quite understand what Fat Cat was saying. Fat Cat glanced at Sakra, who took a step forward and said, "For a god realm swordsman, the realm of unity of sword and martial arts is divided into 4 small realms, namely, the primary unity of sword and martial arts, the intermediate unity of sword and martial arts, the advanced unity of sword and martial arts, and the peak unity of sword and martial arts." Hearing this, Nie Tian was once again dumbfounded. He had not heard of the legendary realm of sword and martial arts as one. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan were also stunned, and they were speechless for a long time. Sakra's gaze swept over Nie Tian and the others as he said, "There is a kind of swordsman who can comprehend the true meaning of the sword and surpass the pinnacle of the unity of sword and martial arts. This kind of swordsman is the legendary swordsman who combines sword and martial arts into one." You. Nie Tian was stunned all of a sudden. His throat couldn't help but roll as he said, "Di Shi Tian, you're the legendary swordsman who fuses sword and martial arts into one." Sakra nodded slightly. His small appearance was extremely lovable. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan stood rooted to the ground, unable to utter a single sound for a long time. Even though the two of them teamed up, they still lost to a legendary swordsman who had fused sword and martial arts together. It was not shameful at all. On the contrary, they should be very proud. Throughout the 9 realms, if it was purely a contest of sword intent, perhaps no one was Indra's opponent. Sakra had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, plus the time he existed as a remnant soul. He was probably older than those old monsters. When he was in the state of a remnant soul, Sakra's strength did not improve, but he was still comprehending the sword Dao, and his understanding of the sword Dao increased day by day. Following by Nie Tian's side, Sakra had a new understanding of the way of the sword. From Nie Tian, he saw an even more terrifying potential of the way of the sword. After a long time, Nie Tian calmed down a little. He looked at Di Shi Tian and asked, "Di Shi Tian, what do you think of your current combat strength?" Sakra hesitated for a moment and said, "If I go all out, my battle prowess should be above that person from the Zhou clan, but I may not be able to beat that city lord." Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he was pleasantly surprised. Sakra only had the strength of an early-stage paramount god, but with the help of his powerful sword Dao cultivation, he could stand shoulder to shoulder with a late-stage paramount god. This was already very abnormal. Sakra's current battle prowess was above Zhou Chuyang, but below Jingli. In fact, what limited Sakra's current battle prowess was not his strength, but his martial body. The body of a 5- or 6-year-old child had not yet matured, which greatly limited Sakra's battle prowess, making his martial body far weaker than ordinary paramount god experts. Gui Wuchan and Jian Jingyun nodded solemnly. Both of them firmly believed Sakra's words. Boss Chinchilla, my body won't always be this big, right? At this time, Sakra came to Nye Tian's side, looking at Fat Cat with pitiful eyes, and asked cautiously. Sakra was very arrogant in front of others, but in front of Fat Cat, he had to be respectful. Although his martial body had recovered and his strength had become stronger, he still wanted to pursue a higher realm. Fat Cat knew the secret of ascending to the Saint Realm, so Sakra was very respectful to her. Fat Cat let out a strange cry, her figure moved, and she fell into Sakra's arms. A 5 or 6-year-old toddler hugging a plump, fat cat. This scene was simply stunning. But who would have thought that the child was once the heaven-slaughtering demon sword, and Fat Cat was the omniscient 9-tailed chinchilla? Fat Cat laughed and said, "Your body is normal, just like other children. It will slowly grow up, and your strength will also increase as your martial body grows up. I estimate that when you are 15 or 16 years old, your strength will reach the peak of the paramount god level." Sakra couldn't help but be a little nervous while holding Fat Cat. He nodded and said, "Thank you, Boss Chinchilla." Sakra was about 6 years old now, which meant that in about 10 years, his body would be close to that of an adult, and his strength would be restored to its peak. From the early stage of the paramount god level to the peak of the paramount god level in 10 years, this speed was absolutely abnormal. But Nye Tian still felt that Sakra's strength increase was still too slow. After all, the latter was originally a warrior at the peak of the paramount god level. Fat Cat laughed and said proudly, "Sakra, from now on, you will follow Nye Tian and live in the 9 extremities world. You will be the master of the 9 extremities world, and you can take all the exotic flowers and plants there and eat them as you please." "Thank you, boss." Sakra's eyes flashed, and he hurriedly expressed his thanks. He knew that the exotic flowers and plants in the 9 extremities world were treasures of heaven and earth, and it was really a wonderful thing to be able to live there. Fat Cat laughed again and said, "Sakra, with your strength growing in the 9 extremities world, I am a little curious about how abnormal you will be in the future." The 9 extremities world was the world that Nye Tian had created, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the power of God were extremely rich there. Growing up in such an environment would be of great benefit to Sakra's martial body, and it would also determine the heights he would reach in the future, which would be unimaginable. "Sakra, I actually have a way to help you recover your strength quickly, but it may not be good for you." Fat Cat raised his eyebrows and suddenly said, "What way?" Nye Tian and Sakra asked at the same time, both very curious. Fat Cat's figure flashed, and he came to Nye Tian's shoulder and said, "Actually, it is very simple, and that is to let Nye Tian speed up the flow of time in the 9 extremities world, so that you can grow faster." Speed up the flow of time? Nye Tian was stunned, and he didn't quite understand what Fat Cat meant. Fat Cat nodded and said with a smile, "Since the 9 extremities world was created by you, you only need to compress the universe lines, and you can speed up the flow of time." Universe lines? Nye Tian stared blankly again, and then he understood. Universe lines, also known as timelines. As long as Nye Tian said timelines, it was equivalent to speeding up the flow of time. If he compressed the universe lines by 1-fold, the flow of time would increase by 1-fold, and 1 year in the 9 extremities world for Sakra would be equivalent to 2 years in the outside world. However, Nye Tian had never done something like compressing universe lines before, so he really didn't have much confidence. Chapter 1804. Fat, is it really good for Sakra to grow up by forcibly accelerating the flow of time in the 9 extremities world? Nye Tian frowned and asked Fat Cat. "Not good." Fat Cat nodded and said, "Although accelerating the flow of time can help Sakra recover his strength faster, it will also make his martial body weaker than ordinary people. And when he reaches the peak of the paramount god realm, his martial body will be too weak, and it will not be good for him to break through to the saint realm." Boss Chinchilla, I want to grow up slowly. Sakura immediately became nervous when he heard that it was not good for him to break through to the Saint Realm. In his previous life, he failed to break through to the Saint Realm and ended up as a remnant soul. Now that he was reborn, he finally had the ability to break through to the Saint Realm again. Of course, he had to be extra careful. It's good to grow up slowly. Anyway, it's only 10 years. It's just a snap of a finger. Fat Cat smiled and moved, returning to the origin embryo space. Sakura entered the Nine Extremities world, but Fat Cat stayed in the origin embryo space because he wanted to use the power of the demonic god Ocean to grow nine tails as soon as possible. Then, Nye Tian took out the Nine Extremities world and let Sakura enter. Nye Tian, what is this? Rui Qinyu saw the Nine Extremities world in Nye Tian's hand and couldn't help but frown and ask curiously. Nye Tian gave a simple explanation, and Rui Qinyu and the others were stunned. Who would have thought that Nye Tian had created an independent world? Sakura had been successfully resurrected. Nye Tian decided to go to the Dark Mountain Range the next morning. The next morning, Nye Tian and the others appeared outside the gate of the 7 cities of darkness. Jingchen, you will go with the young master to the Dark Mountain Range this time. You must protect him. Jing Li's eyes swept over Nye Tian, then fell on Jingchen and nodded. Don't worry, big brother. Jingchen nodded and said, I owe my master and the young master a life. Even if I die, I will not let anything happen to the young master. Yes. Jingli nodded slightly, but his expression was grave. He felt uneasy about not being able to accompany Nye Tian into the obscure mountain range. Jingli, don't worry. I'm not a 3-year-old kid. I'm sure I'll come back safely from the Dark Mountain Range. Nye Tian smiled faintly, then he thought of something and said, I wonder where Old Hai and the others are. If we're lucky, we might be able to meet them. When Yi Qinghai left the Heaven Realm's divine region, he headed for the darkness region. Nye Tian had asked Jingli before, but the latter did not know that Yi Qinghai had also come to the domain of darkness. Perhaps Yi Qinghai had directly gone to the Dark Mountain Range after arriving in the realm of darkness, and did not stay in the 7 dark cities. Nye Tian was very worried. He had been separated from Yi Qinghai for a long time. If the latter had really come to the darkness realm, it would have been several years. He did not know if Yi Qinghai would be able to resist the invasion of the Blood Fiend runes for several years. Jingli, you should go back. We're leaving. Nye Tian did not stay any longer. After bidding farewell, he turned and walked towards the Dark Mountain Range. Jingli stood in the same place, looking at the backs of Nye Tian and the others. His face was slightly solemn. Young lord, there are many slaughterers on the outskirts of the Dark Mountain Range. We must be careful. Soon, the group arrived outside the Dark Mountain Range. Jingli reminded Nye Tian. The slaughterers were those who had been invaded by the Blood Fiend runes and lost their minds. When Nye Tian and the others had just arrived at the darkness region, they had already fought with the slaughterers. Those people were not very strong, but they were bloodthirsty and very difficult to deal with. Nye Tian nodded slightly and let Rui Qinyu stand in the middle of the group. At this moment, Rui Qinyu only had the strength of a mid-stage high god. Without using the rainbow pupils, her combat power was limited. The group did not hesitate and directly entered the Dark Mountain Range. After entering the Dark Mountain Range, Nye Tian could clearly feel the existence of the Blood Fiend runes in the air. However, he was the only one who could feel it. The others could not. Even a late-stage paramount god like Jingchen could not sense the Blood Fiend runes. Only when the Blood Fiend runes had accumulated to a certain extent would the warriors be able to feel it clearly. The group moved forward cautiously and slowly entered the hinterland of the Dark Mountain Range. Young lord, no one knows exactly how big the Dark Mountain Range is. When I first entered the mountain range, I went to a place called Black Wind Cliff. It is a place where people gather. It is said that Black Wind Cliff is a stronghold of the Black Lotus. Jing Chun told Nie Tian some information about the dark mountain range as they walked. However, he had only heard about these things and could not be sure. Jing Chun continued, according to the rumors, the Black Lotus has 72 strongholds and 36 branches. Black Wind Cliff is only a small part of the Black Lotus. Lord Jingchen, since Black Wind Cliff is a stronghold of the Black Lotus, wouldn't we be able to find the people of the Black Lotus by finding the master of Black Wind Cliff? Gui Wutsan asked in confusion. It's not that easy. Jingchen shook his head slightly and said, I have been at Black Wind Cliff for several months and have been secretly asking around. I have not seen anyone from the Black Lotus. The Black Lotus is indeed a mysterious organization. Nie Tian frowned and murmured, Young Lord, take a look at this. At this moment, Jing Chen handed something to Nie Tian. Nie Tian took it and saw that it was a black petal. He did not know what material it was made of, but it looked simple and had a strange aura. Nie Tian went blank for a moment before asking, What's this? When I was at Black Wind Cliff last time, I fought with a man in black. He injured me, but I snatched this petal from him. Jing Chen recalled and said, I guess that the man in black is very likely to be from the Black Lotus. This petal might be some kind of token of the Black Lotus. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. He sensed the aura of the petal, but he did not find anything unusual. Young Lord, keep this black petal. Maybe we can find it in the future. Jing Chen nodded and said with a smile. Nie Tian did not stand on ceremony and kept the black petal. Jing Chen, let's go to Black Wind Cliff first. Nie Tian looked at Jing Chen and said in a deep voice. Okay. Jing Chen nodded and walked at the front, running wildly. The group shuttled through the forest at a very fast speed. Strange, why is it so quiet here? Jing Chen, who was at the front, could not help but feel puzzled. Ever since they entered the dark mountain range, they had not met a single slaughterer. This was too strange. The slaughterers were everywhere in the dark mountain range. They were simply killing machines that walked in the mountains. However, after Nie Tian and the group entered the mountain range, it was surprisingly quiet. However, at this moment, Nie Tian seemed to have sensed something and suddenly shouted, Watch out! Almost at the same time, Jing Chen's expression suddenly changed, and the aura around him surged. Boom! In the air in front of them, a flaming arrow appeared. It was like a flaming dragon rolling forward. Everywhere it passed, the trees were burned to ashes. It was as if the whole world was on fire. Chapter 1805. Young Master, step back. Jing Chen sensed that something was amiss and roared. Immediately, the aura of his body skyrocketed. He stomped on the ground and flew up. He struck out with his palm. The huge palm shadow was like a shield of a mountain, crashing down. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He spread his wings and retreated with Rui Qinyu. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan also reacted quickly and retreated quickly. Boom! Bang! The next moment, the flame arrow fell from the sky and hit the center of the huge palm shadow. A terrible roar sounded, followed by a muffled sound. The mountain-like palm shadow was directly penetrated, and the flame arrow directly pressed down on Jing Chen. Jing Chen's eyes narrowed. He wanted to strike out with his palm again, but it was too late. The flame arrow was like a giant snake, pressing down on him. Suddenly, a scorching aura spread out, and the surrounding space of tens of thousands of meters became a furnace. Bang! Immediately, a muffled sound was heard. Jing Chen's figure flew out like a kite with a broken string, and his whole body was burning. Jing Chen! Seeing this, Nie Tian screamed. He flapped his wings and flew over. An ant with the strength of an upper deity wants to save people? At this moment, a low roar came from the void. Immediately, a line of fire appeared and instantly spread into a sea of flames in the air, rushing towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian was still thousands of meters away, but he felt a suffocating pressure. However, he did not retreat, but directly rushed over. While still in the air, he turned his palm, and a space-time vortex appeared in his palm. It was the Nine Extremities world. Sakura, stop him! Nie Tian roared, and immediately rushed towards Jingchen. Okay. Sakura's voice sounded. Immediately, a ball of golden light gushed out like a golden fireball, directly whizzing towards the sea of flames. Huh! In the void, a surprised voice sounded, and it seemed to be very shocking. When Jian Jingyun and the others saw the golden fireball in the sky, they were stunned. Their expressions were indescribably complicated. That golden fireball was a small beast whose entire body was glittering with golden light. Its body wasn't big, about 10 meters long, and on top of the golden beast's head, Sakura's figure stood upright. Although he had the appearance of a child, he had an aggressive aura. Kill! Sakura growled, and a long sword appeared in his hand. The body of the sword was bigger than him, and with a thrust, countless golden sword shadows appeared, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. In the surrounding space, a terrible sword intent surged. Rumble! In the void, rumbling sounds rang out continuously. Two powerful forces collided with each other, and a terrifying aura spread in the space. On the other side, Nie Tian caught Jingchen. The latter's entire body was burning with flames, and he was actually on the verge of death. The strength of the person who attacked was too terrifying. With the power of one arrow, he directly injured Jingchen. However, this was also because Jingchen attacked hastily and did not display his true strength. The person who attacked was a spirit arrow martial artist. His strength should be similar to Jingchen, around the late paramount god level. A spirit arrow martial artist with this kind of strength could directly lock onto a target from tens of thousands of meters away, or even hundreds of thousands of meters away. In contrast, Jingchen had counterattacked in a situation where he was defenseless, and was at a disadvantage. If they were to fight head-on, Jingchen might not necessarily be a match for the opponent. Nie Tian's whole body surged with a sword intent, extinguishing the flames on Jingchen's body. Then, a wave of power surged out of his palm and entered Jingchen's body. Young master! Nie Tian directly used the power of the pterosaurs. The powerful life force immediately woke Jingchen up, and the wounds on his body immediately healed. His complexion also improved a lot. Jingchen, are you okay? Nie Tian sensed Jingchen's aura. It had already stabilized, and it seemed that his life was not in danger. Jingchen stood up, bowed, and said, "Young master, I am incompetent. I have frightened you." Jingchen was too polite, and it made Nie Tian a little uncomfortable. Nie Tian said, "You rest first." With that, Nie Tian looked in the direction of Sakura Heaven. Up in the sky, Sakura Heaven and a black-garbed man were facing each other. Their auras were extremely powerful, and they were staring at each other with cold, killing intent. Nie Tian swept his divine sense over, and found that the black-garbed man was indeed a late paramount god, just like Jingchen. Judging from his aura alone, the black-garbed man should be about as strong as Jingchen. However, the sneak attack just now had seriously injured Jingchen, and he couldn't fight anymore. "Who the hell are you?" The black-garbed man's eyes flickered as he looked at Sakura Heaven, puzzled. How could he have imagined that the person who blocked his sword was a 5-year-old child? Sakura Heaven's appearance had completely subverted his understanding of the martial Tao, and he couldn't accept it. "Who the hell are you?" Sakura Heaven said in a cold voice, but his childish voice weakened his aura, making him sound a little funny. "You're courting death, you little bastard." The black-garbed man's eyes darkened, and then he flew into a rage. He could tell that Sakura Heaven was only an early paramount god, and a look of contempt appeared in his eyes. "You're the one who's courting death." Sakura Heaven wasn't the least bit afraid. He took a step forward, and his figure towered high in the sky like a sharp sword. At that moment, the black-garbed man's figure flickered, and a huge bow appeared behind him. It was 1,000 meters long, and he drew it. All the power in his body surged out, forming a flaming arrow. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but feel a little worried. If the black-garbed man released an arrow, Sakura Heaven wouldn't be able to withstand it. Sakura Heaven's battle prowess was strong, but his most fatal weakness was that his martial constitution was too weak. Perhaps Sakura Heaven's battle prowess wasn't below Jing Chen's, but his martial constitution was definitely several levels lower than Jing Chen's. At most, it was on par with Jian Shockcloud and Ghost Wu Can. Therefore, even if Sakura Heaven blocked the arrow, the explosion would still be enough to seriously injure him. What a joke! Do you think I'll give you a chance to attack? The corners of Sakura Heaven's mouth curled up into a sinister smile. Cold. His figure flickered, and he stabbed out with his sword. The sword image was like a mountain, majestic and powerful, moving with incredible speed. This sword strike had both speed and power, which was enough to show the strength of Sakura Heaven's sword Dao. The black-garbed man felt the powerful pressure of the sword, and his face couldn't help but change. His eyes trembled, and the arrow that hadn't been completely condensed shot out. Boom! The sword image and the arrow image collided. Sakura Heaven's sword strike was obviously stronger, and the flaming arrow was directly shattered. Not good! The black-garbed man's eyes trembled, and he sensed that something was wrong. He screamed and quickly retreated, but he was still a step too late. Puff! The sword image flew past, and the aftershock reached the black-garbed man. The sound of flesh being cut could be heard, and the sharp sword intent directly chopped off one of the black-garbed man's arms. Leave! The black-garbed man growled, and his figure moved, turning into a black light, and disappeared into the void. Sakura Heaven stood in midair and didn't chase. Nie Tian stared at the severed arm in the air. His figure moved, and with a wave of his hand, there was one more thing in his hand. It was a black petal. This black petal was taken from the black-garbed man's severed arm, and it was exactly the same as the black petal that Jing Chen took out earlier. Nie Tian looked at the black petal in his hand, and his face couldn't help but change. He cried out a name in his heart, Black Lotus. Chapter 1806. Nie Tian looked at the black petal in his hand, and his eyes trembled violently. At this time Di Shi Tian, who was sitting on Jinan, came over. Seeing Nie Tian's strange expression, he asked, Nie Tian, are you okay? Nie Tian shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Then, he took out the 9 extremes, and Di Shi Tian and Jin returned to the 9 extremes. Di Shi Tian and Jinan, this pair seemed to be not bad. Young master! Jing Chen came to Nie Tian's side. Seeing the black petal in Nie Tian's hand, he couldn't help but frown and his face changed. Jian Jingyun and the others also came, and when they saw the black petal, their faces froze. These are 2 identical black petals. Nie Tian's face sank. He took out another black petal and said with a frown, Young master, you mean that the black-clothed martial artist just now is from the Black Lotus? Jing Chen reacted, and his face changed as he said in astonishment. If the black petal is the symbol of the Black Lotus, then the black-clothed martial artist just now must be from the Black Lotus. Nie Tian nodded and his eyes flickered. Apparently, he was thinking about something. If the black-clothed martial artist was from the Black Lotus, then the black-clothed martial artist just now must be from the Black Lotus. This black-clothed martial artist seemed to be waiting for Nie Tian and the others, and then suddenly attacked, wanting to kill Nie Tian and the others. Unfortunately, the black-clothed martial artist didn't expect that there was a freak like Di Shi Tian by Nie Tian's side. Nie Tian, that guy just now was obviously coming for us. If he is from the Black Lotus, why did he want to kill us? Gui Wusan's eyes flickered and he asked in surprise. What's more strange is, how did he know that we would come? Jian Jingyun frowned and asked. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. What Gui Wusan and Jian Jingyun said was exactly what he was thinking at this time. It seemed that as soon as they entered the obscure mountain range, they were targeted by the Black Lotus. Faintly, Tian felt that he had walked into a huge trap. Young master, let's go back first. The Black Lotus is mysterious and unpredictable. Now that we've been targeted by them, it will be difficult for us to go further into the dark mountain range. Jing Chen was stunned for a moment. Then, he said, Black Lotus was mysterious and powerful. No one knew how strong he was. Jing Chen did not care about his own life and death, but he felt the pressure. He was not completely confident that he could protect Tian. That black-robed cultivator from earlier was already very terrifying. However, it was not clear what position this person held in the Black Lotus sect. Who knew what kind of terrifying enemies Tian and the others would encounter next? For the sake of Tian's safety, Jing Chen wanted to return first and discuss with Jing Li before making any further plans. No, we can't go back. Tian looked at Jing Chen with an extremely resolute gaze and said, Since we have already come this far, of course we have to continue. I also want to know how the Black Lotus people know our whereabouts. Although Tian smelled the scent of a conspiracy, he was not someone who would give up easily. Since he had already taken the first step, no matter how difficult the road ahead was, he had to persevere. Jing Chen looked at Tian and felt the determination in the latter's eyes. He knew that it was useless to persuade him, so he did not speak anymore. Next, everyone rested for a while. After Jing Chen's strength recovered a little, they began to advance towards Black Wind Cliff. Along the way, Tian and the others were very cautious and careful, moving very slowly. Fortunately, the journey was smooth. After half a day, the figures of Tian and the others appeared on Black Wind Cliff. Young master, this is Black Wind Cliff. Jing Chen pointed to a village below and said, The people here are all madmen who kill without batting an eye. It's best if we don't provoke them. Tian nodded his head and no longer hesitated. His figure moved and directly landed outside Black Wind Cliff. Black Wind Cliff looked like a small town. Most of the people here had just arrived in the realm of darkness, so their divine senses were still clear. Black Wind Cliff was a place where people could enter and leave freely. Tian and the others did not encounter any obstacles and directly entered Black Wind Cliff. Walking on the street, Tian could feel the fierce gazes of the people around him, which were filled with cold, killing intent. Anyone who came to the domain of darkness came for the sake of slaughter, so they held great enmity towards others. The realm of darkness was a land of killing. Here, as long as you were strong enough, you could kill at will without being bound by any rules. This was a very frightening point, enough to make these bloodthirsty martial artists go crazy. Tian and the others did not look strong, and they were very young. Originally, they would have become easy targets for others to kill. But with Jing Chen by their side, most people would avoid Jing Chen in fear when they saw him. There were not many overgod martial artists in the realm of darkness, and late-stage overgod experts like Jing Chen were extremely rare. Walking on the street, he was a strong deterrent to others. Young master, let's go to the Black Wind restaurant first. Maybe we can get some information there. Jing Chen followed beside Tian, paying attention to every movement in the surroundings. He said, But the Black Wind restaurant has an unspoken rule. No one is allowed to kill people there. Tian nodded slightly, indicating Jing Chen to lead the way. A moment later, Tian and the others arrived at the Black Wind restaurant. The Black Wind restaurant was called a restaurant, but it was actually a huge open-air square. Many people gathered together, eating and drinking and talking loudly. The overall atmosphere seemed good. Tian was very curious. Who set the rule that no one was allowed to kill people in the Black Wind restaurant? Was it someone from the Black Lotus sect? Or was it a rule that everyone who came to the realm of darkness followed? Tian found a relatively remote place to sit down. He was not in a hurry, and was ready to listen to what the people around him were saying. Get lost! However, as soon as Tian and the others sat down, a violent, angry roar rang out. Then, several figures walked over, all of them brimming with killing intent. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at them. Using his divine sense, he found that 3 of them were late-stage overgods, and the one leading was a peak overgod. The strength of these 4 people was indeed very strong. Gui Wuchan was immediately angered. He jumped to his feet, but was stopped by Nie Tian. "Let's go." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He turned around and left, preparing to find another place to sit. "Wait!" That person sneered with disdain. Then, he growled in a low voice, "You can scram, but this little girl has to stay behind to accompany me." With that, the person actually extended his hand, wanting to touch Rui Qianyu. "You're looking to die." Nie Tian could no longer hold back when he saw this. With a growl, forbidden inscriptions surged through his body. He released a sword move, directly attacking the person who had struck out. Even though the person was a peak overgod, he was caught off guard when Nie Tian suddenly struck out at such a close distance. Bang! With a muffled sound, the person was forced back a few steps, directly falling to the ground. The sudden turn of events immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nie Tian, their faces filled with astonishment. No one had thought that Nie Tian would actually attack here. What was this place? The Black Wind Restaurant. All the people who came to the Black Wind Restaurant knew that they could not fight here. This was the only rule in the Black Wind Cliff, and it was a rule that everyone had to follow. Chapter 1807. Little brat, how dare you attack me here? The man stood up and stared at Nie Tian viciously with a cold smile on his face. Nie Tian saw that the people around him were all staring at him with strong killing intent. Nie Tian had broken the rules of the Black Wind Restaurant, which made him the target of everyone. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't expect that these people would care so much about the rules of the Black Wind Restaurant that forbade killing. Jing Chen saw this and frowned. He took a step forward and shouted cold, "Whoever dares to take half a step forward will die." Hearing the word die, everyone's heart sank and their eyes trembled. They didn't dare to step forward. Nie Tian saw that there was someone in Jing Chenzhen's residence. He took a step forward and looked at the person who provoked him. He asked cold, "Who are you?" The person who provoked him seemed arrogant, but there was definitely something strange about him. He knew that Jing Chen was powerful, but he still dared to provoke him. Seeing that Nie Tian had endured it, he attacked Rui Qianyu. Obviously, he wanted to provoke Nie Tian and make Nie Tian attack him. The person sneered. He didn't answer Nie Tian's question, but shouted, "Brothers, this brat has broken the rules of the Black Wind Restaurant. Let's kill him together." "Kill him!" Everyone shouted in unison. They were actually itching to give it a try and make a move. Nie Tian frowned. He glanced at Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuxian and said, "Do it!" Boom! The next moment, Nie Tian, Jian Jingyun, and Gui Wuxian attacked at the same time. 3 powerful sword wills whizzed out and instantly merged together, turning into a deadly sword shadow that rushed towards the person. Bang! The sword shadow whizzed past and blood appeared in the air. The person didn't even have a chance to fight back. He died instantly. Wow! The others all took a deep breath in, and their eyes widened in fear. Who would have thought that not only did Nie Tian make a move, but he also directly killed someone? But no one moved because they didn't dare to move. "Young master, let's leave this place." Jing Chen retreated to Nie Tian's side and prepared to leave. However, Nie Tian had a strange look in his eyes as he said in a heavy voice, "I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to leave." Jing Chen was stunned as he did not understand what Nie Tian meant. "How dare you kill people in the Black Wind Restaurant?" At this moment, a majestic voice rang out, after which a silhouette appeared in midair, exuding an aura as heavy as a mountain. At the same time, dozens of black figures appeared around the huge square. They arrived in an instant and surrounded the entire Black Wind Restaurant. The person behind this has finally come out. Nie Tian's lips curled up as he mumbled. He had long since sensed the faint surge of killing intent in the surroundings. Moreover, the person who provoked him just now was also very strange. He was clearly trying to infuriate him and force him to attack. Who are you people? At this moment, the silhouette in midair descended slightly and looked at Nie Tian, his entire body surging with killing intent. Nie Tian looked at the silhouette in the sky, his face grim. Who are you? This person was very strong at the early paramount god level. His entire body pulsed with a terrifying aura. I am the master of the Black Wind Cliff, Xiang Tsangshuan. Xiang Tsangshuan said in a cold voice. You killed people in the Black Wind restaurant, which is a taboo of the Black Wind Cliff. You deserve to die. The master of the Black Wind Cliff? Everyone was stunned when they heard Xiang Tsangshuan's identity. Their eyes flickered violently. Most of them had no idea that the Black Wind Cliff had a master. The master of the Black Wind Cliff? Nie Tian looked at Xiang Tsangshuan and laughed. I really want to know if you, the master of the Black Wind Cliff, are from the Black Lotus? You're courting death. Xiang Tsangshuan's eyes trembled when he heard Nie Tian mention the Black Lotus. His figure flickered and he charged at Nie Tian. Nie Tian showed no fear. He shot into the sky and swung his sword to meet Xiang Tsangshuan's attack head-on. Hm? Xiang Tsangshuan's figure stabilized in midair, but his eyes were trembling. He hadn't expected Nie Tian to be so strong that he could take his attack head-on. Young master, let me deal with him. Jing Qin couldn't help but worry for Nie Tian's safety when he saw Nie Tian and Xiang Tsangshuan fighting. With a roar, he charged over. Although his strength hadn't recovered to its peak, it was more than enough to kill a puny Xiang Tsangshuan. Jing Qin, protect the others. Leave this person to me. Nie Tian suddenly waved his hand, indicating for Jing Qin not to interfere. Since Xiang Tsangshuan claimed to be the master of Black Wind Cliff, it was very likely that he was related to the Black Lotus. Hence, he couldn't die. Xiang Tsangshuan was stunned for a moment, but then he sneered. Brat, you think you can fight me with just you? The person he feared the most was Jing Qin, but he was very surprised that Nie Tian wouldn't let Jing Qin interfere. You really want to kill me? Who told me to kill myself? Nie Tian looked at Xiang Tsangshuan and spoke in a cold voice. A black petal appeared in his hand as he said, The owner of the petal told you to kill me, right? Black Lotus. Xiang Tsangshuan's eyes widened when he saw the black petal in Nie Tian's hand. Why do you have this? Xiang Tsangshuan never imagined that Nie Tian would have a black lotus. The black petal was called the Black Lotus, and was the symbol of the Black Lotus. Within the Black Lotus, only those with a sufficiently high status, such as the 12 Lotus Lords, would have a Black Lotus. Nie Tian wasn't a member of the Black Lotus at all, so how could he have a Black Lotus? As I thought. Nie Tian frowned as he took in Xiang Tsangshuan's reaction. He was now certain that the Black Lotus in his hand was the symbol of the Black Lotus, and that Xiang Tsangshuan was a member of the Black Lotus. Xiang Tsangshuan, are you surprised that I have a Black Lotus? Nie Tian became cold for a moment. The corners of his lips curled into a U smile as he said, The person who provoked me just now was arranged by you. You forced me to attack because you wanted a reason to kill me, right? Xiang Tsangshuan was taken aback, his face filled with shock. The person who provoked Nie Tian earlier was indeed arranged by him. He had forced Nie Tian to attack so that he could justifiably kill Nie Tian. Xiang Tsangshuan, you and I don't know each other. Why do you want to kill me? Nie Tianling sneered as he continued to ask, Who exactly is behind you? Xiang Tsangshuan couldn't have killed Nie Tian for no reason. There had to be a reason for him to do so. There had to be someone behind him. Nie Tian guessed that Xiang Tsangshuan had been ordered by the Black Lotus to kill him. But this time, Nie Tian was wrong. Xiang Tsangshuan's attempt to kill him was not ordered by the Black Lotus. There was someone else behind him. Silver-haired kid, you're really smart. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out and said in a low voice, however, your path ends here. Today you will die for sure. It's him. Nye Tian couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard the voice. It was a very familiar voice. Chapter 1808. Someone from the Zhou clan. I didn't expect it to be you. Nye Tian couldn't help trembling when he saw Zhou Chuyang, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He originally thought that Xiang Tsangxuan had been ordered by the Black Lotus to kill him, but it turned out that Zhou Chuyang was the mastermind. Kid, are you surprised to see me? Zhou Chuyang stepped forward, his aura surging. He glanced at Xiang Tsangxuan with a playful smile and said, I didn't expect to meet my former subordinate here. Xiang Tsangxuan was indeed the master of Black Wind Cliff, but he was once Zhou Chuyang's subordinate before entering the darkness area. After Zhou Chuyang left the 7 dark cities, he had predicted that Nye Tian would enter the Darkness Mountain Range, so he entered ahead of time and coincidentally found Xiang Tsangxuan at Black Wind Cliff. Everything Xiang Tsangxuan had done just now was under Zhou Chuyang's orders. Xiang Tsangxuan looked at Zhou Chuyang and transmitted his voice. My lord, this kid has a black lotus. I'm afraid it will be troublesome. Nye Tian taking out the black lotus caught Xiang Tsangxuan off guard. Xiang Tsangxuan was worried that Nye Tian might have some kind of relationship with the black lotus. Zhou Chuyang glared at Xiang Tsangxuan, but didn't say a word. He didn't care about the black lotus in Nye Tian's hand. What he cared about was the earth vein source in Nye Tian's body. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Chuyang's eyes trembled. Kid, I'll give you one more chance. Obediently return with me, and I'll keep you and your friend safe. How about it? Nye Tianling sneered. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? I won't live past a day if I return with you. Zhou Chuyang was very stubborn about the earth vein source. If Nye Tian returned with him, there would only be one outcome, death. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Zhou Chuyang's face darkened. Killing intent surged in his eyes as he growled, Since you insist on dying, don't blame me. Without the city lord's intervention, let's see who can save you. As his deep voice fell, Zhou Chuyang's figure moved. The black sand around his body danced wildly, and his entire body turned into a sandstorm that swept towards Nye Tian. Young master! When Jing Chen saw the situation, he roared and dashed into the sky. Boom! However, at this moment, a roar suddenly sounded in the sky. A flaming arrow rolled over from the horizon, and its target was Jing Chen. Jing Chen, be careful! The sudden scene caused Nye Tian to be stunned, and he immediately cried out. It was obvious that the person who attacked was the spirit arrow martial artist from before. Nye Tian didn't expect this guy to appear at this time. Jing Chen sensed that something was amiss and sent out a palm strike. Thousands of thorns appeared in the air and instantly gathered together, forming a huge shield that enveloped Jing Chen. Boom! The flaming arrow landed and directly bombarded the shield around Jing Chen. The tens of thousands of thorns actually cracked inch by inch, and a scorching aura spread out, pressing down on Jing Chen. Di Shi Tian! At the critical moment, Nye Tian roared. Immediately, a golden light gushed out, followed by a sword shadow whizzing out, and actually smashed the flaming arrow in the air. Jing Chen's figure retreated thousands of meters away and stabilized himself. His entire body was dripping with blood, but his aura was still stable, and his life was not in danger. Damn it! Puff! Jing Chen roared angrily. His blood and qi attacked his heart. His body swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His strength was clearly not weaker than that spirit arrow martial artist, but the latter hid in the dark and launched a sneak attack, catching him off guard. Twice in a row, this spirit arrow martial artist almost took Jing Chen's life. Jing Chen, are you all right? Nye Tian flew over, looked at Jing Chen, and asked nervously. Young master, this subordinate is fine. Jing Chen took a deep breath, and the wounds on his body began to heal slowly. Nie Tian looked into the void. That spirit arrow martial artist did not appear. It seemed that, after shooting an arrow, he left directly. Damn it! The next time I see this person, I will definitely kill him. Jing Chen's eyes were burning with anger as he growled out. What is it? On the other side, when Zhou Chuyang saw Sakra's figure, his pupils suddenly constricted, and he couldn't help but cry out with a face full of disbelief. The power of that sword just now was really strong. Zhou Chuyang never thought that the person who used this sword was actually a 5 or 6-year-old baby. I didn't see it wrong, right? That's actually a child? The people below were also stunned and cried out repeatedly, even suspecting that they had seen wrongly. Sakra's strength and appearance were really too discordant, and it brought a huge shock to everyone. Nie Tian, how should we deal with this guy? Sakra stepped on the golden centipede and didn't even look at Zhou Chuyang. Instead, he asked Nie Tian. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. The corner of his mouth twitched and he spat out a word, "Kill!" Zhou Chuyang followed him from Death's Ferry all the way here, wholeheartedly wanting to obtain the Terra Vein source. This posed a great threat to Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't want this person to live anymore. When Sakra heard Nie Tian's words, his childish face darkened, and his large eyes shone with terrifying killing intent. Zhou Chuyang's expression flickered when he sensed Sakra's killing intent. It actually made him feel threatened. However, he was a late paramount god, so he quickly regained his composure. "You're only an early paramount god, kid," he said coldly. "You're only an early paramount god. How are you supposed to fight me, a late paramount god? I can kill you with a single palm strike." "Is that so?" Sakra's figure flickered, and as he hovered there in midair, the sword energy around him became so sharp that it seemed capable of ripping apart heaven and earth. His mouth twitched and he said coldly, "I only need one sword strike to kill you. You're courting death." How could Zhou Chuyang endure being ridiculed by a 5 or 6-year-old child? He was instantly enraged, and with a low roar, his figure flashed. His entire body surged with black sand that surged without end, and the entire sky started to tremble. Zhou Chuyang's figure had already disappeared. His entire body seemed to have become a black tornado, and within the tornado were black sand that looked like sharp blades. The violent black tornado was thousands of meters long, and the space around it was pulled taut, as if it would collapse in the next moment. How terrifying! The crowd below looked at the terrifying tornado in the sky, their eyes trembling as they exclaimed in their hearts. Sakra's figure stood tall in the air like a mountain. Facing the tornado that engulfed the heaven and earth, there was no fear in his eyes, only the most extreme killing intent. Heaven-slaughtering devil sword, blood scar. In the next moment, the corner of Di Tian's mouth trembled and he muttered. As his voice fell, the sword in his hand suddenly stabbed out. Instantly, a blood-red sword shadow whizzed out. It was like a red line. It was not vast, but the power and killing intent contained within it was terrifying. The blood-colored sword image pierced through the tornado, and the tornado suddenly stopped. Then it dissipated and a figure appeared in midair. It was Zhou Chuyang. Zhou Chuyang realized something, and just as he opened his mouth, a red line appeared on his neck, and blood sprayed out. Chapter 1809. The moment Zhou Chuyang's head was cut off, countless eyes stared at the bloody scene in the air with trembling eyes and lifeless expressions. The scene fell into a deathly silence. Even the drop of a needle could be heard. Indra had killed Zhou Chuyang with a single sword strike. This scene was too shocking. To kill a late-stage paramount god with a single sword strike, such strength was truly terrifying. Nie Tian, who was watching from the side, was also stunned. The power of Sakra Heaven's sword was beyond his imagination. Indra had said before that his battle strength was above Zhou Chuyang's, but to kill the latter with a single sword strike was a little too terrifying. Zhou Chuyang, an elder of the Zhou family, had died in the darkness. Indra had killed Zhou Chuyang not only because of his terrifying battle strength, but also because Zhou Chuyang had been careless. He had thought that Indra's strength was only at the early stage paramount god level, so he hadn't taken him seriously. He hadn't even used his full strength in that palm strike just now, so he had died tragically. Indra's figure moved, returning to Nie Tian's side, but his cold eyes were locked on Xiang Tsangshuan. As long as Nie Tian said the word, he could kill Xiang Tsangshuan with a single sword strike. Nie Tian came to his senses and smiled faintly, looking at Xiang Tsangshuan with a playful expression. Xiang Tsangshuan's dazed expression finally eased a little. His mouth hung open, but he was unable to utter a single word. Xiang Tsangshuan, let's find a place to talk, said Nie Tian with a faint smile. Xiang Tsangshuan didn't feel any killing intent from Nie Tian. He breathed a sigh of relief and nodded repeatedly. He waved his hand to dismiss the black-clothed men around him. Since Zhou Chuyang had died at Indra's hands, Xiang Tsangshuan didn't dare to act rashly. Very good, you're tactful. Nie Tian smiled coldly, then left the Black Wind restaurant with the others. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others landed in a valley outside the Black Wind cliff. Nie Tian let Indra and Jin Tu return to the Nine Superbs. With Jing Chen around, Xiang Tsangshuan wouldn't dare to play any trick. Moreover, given Nie Tian's strength, even if the others didn't make a move, he wouldn't be afraid of Xiang Tsangshuan. He estimated that Xiang Tsangshuan's battle strength was below the Ghost King Palace Master. My lord. Xiang Tsangshuan's voice trembled as he looked at Nie Tian. Xiang Tsangshuan, I have some questions to ask you. Think carefully before you answer. Nie Tian icily stared at Xiang Tsangshuan as he let out a sinister laugh. If you lie to me, I guarantee that you will not have an easy death. Xiang Tsangshuan bowed and nodded. He felt a chill run down his spine as large beads of sweat beaded on his forehead. Yes. Please ask. I will definitely answer truthfully and will not dare to deceive you. Nie Tian smiled and nodded. A black lotus appeared in his hand and said, Do you recognize this black petal? Yes. Xiang Tsangshuan glanced at the black petals and nodded. This is a black lotus, the symbol of the black lotus. Very good. Nie Tian confirmed the black lotus in his hand and immediately put it away. He looked at Xiang Tsangshuan and coldly smiled. It seems that you, the master of Black Wind Cliff, are also from the Black Lotus. No, I'm not from the Black Lotus. Xiang Tsangshuan suddenly raised his head to look at Nie Tian and repeatedly waved his hand. You're not from the Black Lotus? Nie Tian frowned. His face suddenly turned gloomy as he growled, You're not from the Black Lotus, how do you know about the Black Lotus? And how did you become the master of Black Wind Cliff? Xiang Tsangshuan's face turned deathly pale. He gulped and said in a trembling voice, It's true that I am the master of Black Wind Cliff, but I'm not qualified to join the Black Lotus. I only take orders from the Black Lotus. Speak clearly. Nie Tian frowned and shouted in a cold voice. Yes. Xiang Tsangshuan repeatedly nodded in fear. His whole body was already drenched in sweat. The Black Lotus is a mysterious organization that controls the entire Darkness region. There are many places like Black Wind Cliff in the Gloom Mountain Range where martial artists who have just come to the mountain range gather. In order to control these places, the Black Lotus will appoint a manager. However, this manager is not from the Black Lotus, but must take orders from the Black Lotus. Hearing this, Nie Tian gradually understood that Xiang Tsangshuan was only someone chosen by the Black Lotus to manage Black Wind Cliff. He was not qualified to join the Black Lotus. Nie Tian frowned and asked in a cold voice, Have you seen anyone from the Black Lotus? Yes. Xiang Tsangshuan nodded and honestly said, Every half a year, the Black Lotus people will come to Black Wind Cliff and give me some pills. After taking these pills, I can resist the Blood Fiend runes for half a year. So that's how it is. Nie Tian nodded. He was just wondering why Xiang Tsangshuan had not been swallowed by the blood fiend runes and turned into a slaughterer. It turned out that he had taken the Black Lotus pills. It seemed that the Black Lotus method of controlling the darkness realm was actually very simple. It was to build many martial artist gathering places like Black Wind Cliff in the Gloom Mountain Range, and then appoint a manager. As long as one controlled this manager, it was equivalent to controlling all the martial artists. These martial artists would kill each other, and in the end, they would be controlled by the blood fiend runes and thrown into the Gloom Mountain Range, becoming slaughterers like wild beasts. The entrance to the darkness realm from the God Sealing region, the Ferry of Death, opened once a month. Every time, tens of thousands of people would come in. These tens of thousands of people were the fresh blood that constantly poured into the darkness realm, causing the darkness realm to always exist in the midst of slaughter. Nie Tian guessed that there must be more than one entrance to the darkness realm. There might be other entrances in other domains. There were 9 cities outside the Gloom Mountain Range, which also implied that there should be 9 entrances to the darkness realm. Nie Tian's guess was right. There were indeed 9 entrances to the darkness realm, but he did not know about the other entrances. Gui Wuchan only knew that there was an entrance to the God Sealing region, so they directly came to the God Sealing region. Nie Tian looked at Xiang Tsangshuan and asked, "How much do you know about the Black Lotus?" Xiang Tsangshuan's eyes flickered in thought. Then, he trembled and said, "I'm just a lowly master of Black Wind Cliff. I don't even know where the Black Lotus is." Nie Tian's face darkened, and killing intent surged in his eyes. My lord." Xiang Tsangshuan felt Nie Tian's killing intent and hurriedly said, "I know that the Black Lotus has a Black Lotus King. It is said that the Black Lotus King controls the entire Black Lotus. The Black Lotus King has 12 Lotus Masters under him, and every one of them is an extremely terrifying existence. The Black Lotus in your hand can only be possessed by someone at the Lotus Master level." Black Lotus King, Lotus Master. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed continuously. A moment later, Nie Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, do you know how to find the Black Lotus?" This. Xiang Tsangshuan's eyes flickered in thought, and he stuttered, as if unwilling to speak. "Speak." Nie Tian growled, a fierce look in his eyes. Xiang Tsangshuan was scared out of his wits. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, "My lord, if you want to find the Black Lotus, you must first obtain the massacre token." "Kill orders?" Nie Tian went blank for a moment before asking, "What's that?" Chapter 1810. The Path of Massacre? Nie Tian was taken aback once again. His expression darkened as he stared coldly at Xiang Tsangshuan. "Speak clearly." Xiang Tsangshuan's expression turned nervous. After taking a deep breath, he said, "The Path of Massacre is a massacre competition organized by the Black Lotus. I don't know what the Path of Massacre is like, but I heard that as long as you pass the test, you will be qualified to join the Black Lotus." Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as his mind raced. He never imagined that the Black Lotus would have a massacre competition. The martial practitioners that entered the darkness region were all bloodthirsty people. Coupled with the existence of the blood fiend runes and a massacre competition, the entire darkness region would descend into a state of massacre. Xiang Tsangshuan looked at Nie Tian and said, "Lord, you may be able to participate in the Path of Massacre if you want to find the Black Lotus. But you must first obtain a massacre token." Nie Tian's gaze trembled as he asked, "How do I obtain a massacre token?" Xiang Tsangshuan's eyes flickered in thought as he explained, "Every gathering point has many massacre tokens, which are in the hands of the martial practitioners. As long as you can find a martial artist with a massacre token and kill him, you will be able to obtain the massacre token in his hands." Nie Tian frowned. If Xiang Tsangshuan had not told him, how would he have thought that one had to kill to obtain a massacre token? Jing Chen, who was listening at the side, was also dumbfounded. He had stayed at Black Wind Cliff for nearly half a year, but he had never heard anything about the massacre writ. Nie Tian pondered for a moment before he asked, "How do I participate in the path of massacre after obtaining a massacre token?" Xiang Tsangxuan nodded solemnly as he coldly said, "As long as you have a massacre token, the Black Lotus will come looking for you." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at Xiang Tsangxuan and asked, "One last question. How do I find someone with a massacre token?" The massacre token was in the hands of the Black Wind Cliff martial practitioners, but he did not know who had it. Although Black Wind Cliff was not big, there were still more than 100,000 people. Nie Tian could not possibly kill them all one by one. This. Xiang Tsangxuan hesitated before shaking his head. "I don't know either." "I'll give you one more chance," said Nie Tian coldly, frowning. "Think carefully before you answer." I really don't know." Xiang Tsangxuan shook his head repeatedly, his face drenched in cold sweat. Nie Tian's expression darkened as he stared at Xiang Tsangxuan. It seemed that Xiang Tsangxuan indeed did not know how to find someone with a slaughter token. This was a little troublesome. Even if they stood still and let Nie Tian search them, it would take at least a few months. Nie Tian did not have that much time to waste. "Nie Tian, what should we do now?" Looking towards Nie Tian, Gui Wukan asked with a helpless expression. Nie Tian let out a long breath and said, "We can only look around and try our luck." "My lord." Xiang Tsangxuan suddenly opened his mouth, as if he had thought of something. "My lord, perhaps the Black Lotus in your hand can help you find the slaughter token." Nie Tian was slightly taken aback, but quickly understood. Xiang Tsangxuan had just said that the people of Black Lotus would come looking for him as long as he had the slaughter token. This meant that the people of Black Lotus had a special method to sense the slaughter token. Since the Black Lotus was the symbol of Black Lotus, it might be able to sense the slaughter token. "Xiang Tsangxuan, you can leave now." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly, indicating that Xiang Tsangxuan could leave. Xiang Tsangxuan was taken aback, his eyes involuntarily trembling. He was very worried that Nie Tian would kill him when he was not paying attention. Jing Chen frowned as he stepped forward and asked, "Young master, are you really going to let him go?" Xiang Tsangxuan knew too much, and it would be extremely disadvantageous to Nie Tian and the rest if it was leaked. "It's fine, let him go." Nie Tian did not seem to care at all. He smiled faintly and allowed Xiang Tsangxuan to leave. Xiang Tsangxuan was not a member of Black Lotus, and had no idea how to find them. Moreover, even if he did find someone from Black Lotus, there was no way he would tell Nie Tian and the rest. He had told Nie Tian too many things, and if the people of Black Lotus found out, he would be the first to die. Nie Tian believed that Xiang Tsangxuan was a smart person and would not do anything foolish. After Xiang Tsangxuan left, Jing Chen looked towards Nie Tian and asked, "Young master, what should we do next?" In Jing Chen's opinion, it was already very amazing that they could find out so many things right after arriving at Black Wind Cliff. All of this was thanks to Zhou Chuyang. If not for him, Xiang Tsangxuan would not have appeared. Nie Tian smiled faintly as he looked at the Black Lotus in his hand and said, "Let's first confirm whether the Black Lotus can sense the slaughter token." Next, Nie Tian and the rest left the valley and returned to Black Wind Cliff. As they walked on the street, Nie Tian could not help but feel a little excited as he looked at the Black Lotus. They had walked more than half the street, but there was no movement from the Black Lotus. Could it be that the Black Lotus has no ability to sense the slaughter token? Nie Tian frowned and thought to himself, if that was the case, it would be really difficult for them to find the slaughter token. At this moment, Jian Jingyun suddenly opened his mouth, his eyes flickering with a strange light as he muttered, "If you have the slaughter token and are afraid of others snatching it, what would you do?" Everyone was taken aback, not quite understanding what Jian Jingyun was trying to say. Gui Wuchan frowned and replied, I would find a safe place to hide. Right. Jian Jingyan laughed and said, What is the safest place in Black Wind Cliff? Nie Tian was taken aback again, but he immediately reacted and blurted out, Black Wind Restaurant. The safest place in Black Wind Cliff was definitely the Black Wind Restaurant, because it was the only place where killing was not allowed. Smart. Nie Tian looked at Jian Jingyun with a smile at the corner of his mouth and muttered, If I had a kill command, I would definitely stay in the Black Wind Restaurant. That's right. Gui Wuchan, as if awakened from a dream, suddenly shouted, patted Jian Jingyun's shoulder, and said with a mischievous smile, I couldn't tell that you, this guy, are quite scheming. Let's go to the Black Wind Restaurant. Nie Tian nodded excitedly and directly went to the Black Wind Restaurant. After a while, everyone arrived at the Black Wind Restaurant. At this time, the Black Wind Restaurant had already returned to normal. The appearance of Nie Tian and the others did not cause too much of a commotion, and many people had already forgotten about them. What these people remembered was the 5 or 6 years old Disher Tian. Nie Tian walked bit by bit, carefully observing the reaction of the Black Lotus. At this time, he suddenly saw the Black Lotus suddenly flash. Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, unable to conceal the excitement in his eyes. He immediately stopped and carefully observed everyone within 10 meters of him. He sensed bit by bit, and finally, he locked his target on a martial artist dressed in green. It's him. Nie Tian stared at the martial artist dressed in green and walked step by step. With every step he took, the Black Lotus flashed more and more intensely. Chapter 1811. Nie Tian's eyes shone brightly as he looked at the flickering Black Lotus. The Black Lotus really was wondrous. It could sense the existence of the decimation medallion. However, this sense was not very powerful. It was evident that the Black Lotus was not specially used to sense the decimation medallion. It was just that there was some connection between the two, so it could sense it. Nie Tian stowed the Black Lotus away after confirming that the cultivator had the decimation medallion. He slowly made his way over to the cultivator and directly sat down. The cyan-clothed martial artist was taken aback. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and stared at him with eyes like those of a ferocious wolf. Intense killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, Get lost. Clearly, the cultivator treated Nie Tian as someone who was purposefully provoking him, so he directly released his killing intent to force Nie Tian to leave. However, Nie Tian smiled faintly. He scanned the cultivator with the senses of his soul. The man's killing intent was very strong. His eyes were slightly scarlet, and he reeked of blood. Moreover, he was not weak. He was a peak over god. Nie Tian could sense that the talismans of fiend's blood in the man's body were extremely dense, to the point where he was almost out of control. He guessed that the man's senses would be devoured by the talismans of fiend's blood in half a month if nothing went wrong. He would become a mindless slaughterer. I'll say it again. Piss off. When the azure-robed man saw that Nie Tian had no intention of leaving and was instead sizing him up with a playful expression, he couldn't help but feel a little angry. With a low roar, he released a strong killing intent from his body and directly enveloped Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He secretly released a presence and blocked the man's killing intent without batting an eyelid. The man was suddenly stunned. He had never thought that Nie Tian would be so powerful. Originally, he was surprised. Nie Tian was only a mid-high god, so it was impossible for him to resist his killing intent. However, he had never thought that Nie Tian would be able to nullify his killing intent so easily without even noticing. What are you trying to do? The azure-robed man's cold eyes turned slightly red, but he still suppressed the anger in his heart. After all, this was the Black Wind Restaurant, and he couldn't simply start a fight. Help you? Nie Tian faintly smiled. You're a smart person, so you should have already sensed that there's a murderous energy surging in your body, causing you to constantly want to kill. Only by killing can you feel satisfied, right? Nye Tian could tell that this azure-clothed man was a person with a firm temperament. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to resist the blood fiend symbols for so long. The azure-robed man's eyes darkened and his expression changed. Recently, he did feel that his desire to kill was getting stronger and stronger, to the point where he was about to lose control of it. Only killing could make him feel satisfied. However, he knew that he was not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. He came to the domain of darkness only to gain experience. He could faintly feel a kind of power entering his body, slowly changing his will. However, he did not know what this power was. He did not know how to expel this power from his body. He was curious as to how Nye Tian could tell this. Could it be that he knows how to restrain my desire to kill? The azure-clothed man frowned slightly, and his expression suddenly changed. He looked at Nye Tian with a burning gaze. I think we can talk now. Nye Tian looked at the azure-clothed martial artist's reaction and asked with a smile, What's your name? Yu Feilong. The azure-clothed man felt that Nye Tian did not have any ill intentions, so he instantly relaxed and said in a deep voice, Yu Feilong? Nye Tian was stunned when he heard the name. He then laughed and said, You're from the Yu family? The Yu family was one of the 9 great creation families. The heartbroken young master that Nye Tian met in the astonishing territory was from the Yu family. The heartbroken young master had helped Nye Tian before, so he had a good impression of the Yu family. Yes. Yu Feilong nodded and asked, Who are you? What did you mean when you said you could help me? Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, My name is Nye Tian. When I said I could help you, I meant to help you expel the blood fiend runes from your body. Blood fiend runes? Yu Feilong was stunned. He had never heard of such a thing. There were many secrets in the realm of darkness, such as the blood fiend runes, the Black Lotus, the Massacre Order, and the Massacre Path. Only a few people knew about these secrets, but the people of the realm of darkness did not communicate with others, so it was difficult for these secrets to be spread. Most people could feel the existence of the blood fiend runes in the later stages, but they did not know what kind of power it was. The dark mountain range is filled with blood fiend runes. These runes constantly invade the bodies of cultivators and devour their divine consciousness. The desire to kill in your body comes from the blood fiend runes. Nye Tian nodded and explained, As long as I can expel the blood fiend runes from your body, you will no longer have such a strong desire to kill. Yu Feilong froze for a moment, his face slightly stiffening. Then, he became startled and said, Why should I believe you? You must believe me because you have no other choice. Nye Tian smiled faintly and released an overbearing confidence from his body. He said, I think you have seen a lot of slaughterers, killing machines that only have the desire to kill. If you don't want to become a slaughterer, then you must believe me. Yu Feilong was stunned. He did not expect Nye Tian to be so domineering. He felt a terrifying self-confidence from Nye Tian. This was not a temperament that an ordinary person could show. Yu Feilong indeed had no other choice. He felt that the slaughterer's power in his body was getting stronger and stronger. If he did not expel the blood fiend runes from his body, he would soon become a slaughterer. Have you made up your mind? Nye Tian looked at Yu Feilong and said lightly, If you have made up your mind, then come with me. Yu Feilong looked at Nye Tian and then glanced at the few people behind Nye Tian. His eyes were still a little hesitant, as if he was worried about something. You are wondering why I am helping you, right? Nye Tian looked at Yu Feilong and smiled. He did not beat around the bush and said directly, I am helping you because I want something from you. What is it? Yu Feilong was suddenly stunned. His pupils suddenly shrank and he became obviously nervous. The killing order, Nye Tian said in a deep voice. Yu Feilong's eyes trembled and his face was obviously stiff. He said in surprise, How did you know? Yu Failong could not understand why Nie Tian knew that he had the killing order. The killing order was a secret. Not many people in the entire Dark Mountain range knew about it. Yu Failong looked at Nie Tian and immediately understood that the latter had come for the killing order. Yu Failong, don't be nervous. Nie Tian smiled and said, what I want is the killing order, not your life. You have two choices now. The first one is that we help each other. You give me the killing order and I will help you force out the Bloodfiend runes. As for the second choice, I will kill you and get the killing order. Chapter 18:12. Yu Failong's eyes flickered with unconcealable nervousness. He wasn't too afraid of Nie Tian, but the people behind Nie Tian terrified him. Especially Jing Chen, who had the strength of a late paramount god. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry. He calmly looked at Yu Failong, waiting for him to make a decision. After Yu Failong calmed down, Nie Tian asked, have you made up your mind? Yu Failong calmed down and said in a low voice, I'll go with you. In fact, he had no choice but to help Nie Tian. Nie Tian rose to his feet and turned around to leave. There were too many people in the Black Wind restaurant, so there were some things that couldn't be done here. Nie Tian and the others left the Black Wind restaurant and came to a dense forest near the Black Wind cliff. Let's do it here. Nie Tian spread out his senses to make sure there was no one around, then stopped. Next, Nie Tian didn't waste any time. He immediately used his demon god power to force out the Bloodfiend runes for Yu Failong. All right. Nie Tian took a deep breath and withdrew his divine and devil power. His tense expression eased considerably. Yu Failong didn't find anything different about his body, but he could clearly feel the desire to kill in his heart disappear. His mind was calm, and the ruthlessness in his eyes was gone. Yu Failong, I've done what I promised you. It's your turn. Nie Tian let out a breath of turbid air and looked at Yu Failong. Yu Failong nodded, then took out a black command medallion and handed it to Nie Tian, saying, This is the kill medallion you asked for. Nie Tian took the token and sent his divine sense into it. Sure enough, he sensed an aura that was very similar to the Black Lotus. Immediately afterwards, Nie Tian examined the kill medallion with rapt attention and discovered that it contained some information about its uses. It was similar to what Xiang Tsangxuan had said. The massacre token was the key to enter the path of massacre, and only by obtaining the massacre token would one have the right to participate. However, the next piece of information made Nie Tian abruptly freeze. The slaughter order had not been activated yet, and it required 13 more blood traces to activate. 13 blood traces? What do you mean? Nie Tian frowned with a puzzled expression. Yu Failong took a step forward and explained, When I just obtained the massacre medallion, the medallion indicated that it can only be activated after absorbing 100 blood traces. Blood marks are something formed by the condensation of a cultivator's blood qi. Only cultivators from the domain of darkness have blood marks. So, 100 blood traces are equivalent to the lives of 100 martial artists. Nie Tian's expression changed slightly as he said solemnly, Yes. Yu Failong nodded and said, If you want to activate the massacre medallion, you must let the medallion absorb 100 blood traces. Nie Tian's eyes involuntarily tightened. The massacre medallion in his hand still needed 13 blood traces to activate. It seemed that Yu Failong had already killed 87 people. Nie Tian didn't pay much attention to it. After all, most of the people who came to the realm of darkness were here to kill. In this place, if you didn't kill, you would be killed. Killing a few dozen people wasn't a big deal. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, What happens after the massacre medallion is activated? I don't know. Yu Failong shook his head. He indeed did not know what would happen after the massacre medallion was activated. But he had always wanted to kill people, and after killing them, the blood traces in their bodies would automatically dissipate and be absorbed by the massacre medallion. Nie Tian's consciousness once again carefully scanned the massacre medallion, not missing a single detail. At this time, he really found that the massacre medallion had 100 thin blood-colored slots. 87 of them were filled with blood traces, and the remaining 13 were empty. And above the blood-colored slots was a cluster of densely packed runes. Nye Tian sensed a very strong space-time aura from these runes. It seemed that these runes contained a space-time array. Nye Tian looked at the massacre medallion in his hand, and his eyes flickered. This small medallion contained a lot of hidden mysteries. "Yu Feilong, I really want to know, how did you get the massacre medallion?" Nye Tian put away the massacre medallion, then looked at Yu Feilong and asked doubtfully. "When I just arrived at the Black Wind Cliff, a black-robed man gave it to me." Yu Feilong nodded and said, "I don't know that black-robed man. After he gave me the medallion, he directly left without saying anything." Nye Tian's face sank as he carefully pondered. He guessed that the person who gave Yu Feilong the massacre medallion was most likely someone from the Black Lotus. He reckoned that there were many people in the Black Wind Cliff who had obtained the massacre medallion like Yu Feilong. In order to activate the medallion, these people who possessed the massacre medallion had to constantly kill people, making the entire Dark Realm more bloody. The Black Lotus was indeed a terrifying organization. Nye Tian even suspected that the Blood Fiend runes in the Dark Mountain Range were also the doing of the Black Lotus. "Yu Feilong, you should leave the Dark Realm." Nye Tian became cold and said to Yu Feilong. Yu Feilong also looked at Nye Tian. After hesitating for a long time, he finally nodded. He came to the Dark Realm to gain experience. It was best for him to leave now. "Young Master Yu, you should return to the Dark Seven Cities. The city lord there is my elder brother. He will help you leave the Dark Realm." Jing Chen said to Yu Feilong with a faint smile. "Many thanks." Yu Feilong bowed and thanked him. After saying goodbye, he did not stay any longer and turned to leave. His figure moved and he flew into the air. Nye Tian looked at Yu Feilong's figure and smiled faintly. Yu Feilong leaving was the best outcome. However, at this moment, Nye Tian suddenly sensed something. His pupils shrank and his face darkened. He shouted, "Yu Feilong, be careful!" Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time as his voice sounded, more than a dozen flaming arrows suddenly fell from the sky. Each arrow was thousands of meters long. They connected in the air like a sea of fire that was tens of thousands of meters wide. They pressed down on Yu Feilong aggressively. Yu Feilong was in midair. When he saw the sudden scene, his face darkened, and his eyes began to tremble. He forcefully released the aura of his entire body and struck out with his palm. A mighty palm shadow appeared, but it seemed extremely insignificant in the face of the sea of fire that covered the sky and covered the earth. Nye Tian sensed that something was wrong. He frowned and rushed over, but he was still a step too late. Boom! Endless booms rang out as the sea of fire expanded, directly swallowing Yu Feilong's figure. He did not even have the chance to cry out in the end. Yu Feilong! Nye Tian could not help but become furious at the sight before him. He roared out and unleashed all of his sword force. He stood in the air like a sharp sword, a murderous sword. Nye Tian stared at the empty space with a sunken gaze as killing intent surged from his body. A while later, the sea of fire dispersed, and over a dozen figures in black appeared in the air. Every single one of them possessed powerful presences. They were all peak-over gods. Chapter 1813. In the air, Nye Tian's eyes locked onto the dozen men in black with a stern expression. These people had killed Yu Feilong in front of him. "Who are you?" Nye Tian asked with a strong killing intent in his voice. One of the black-clothed men stepped forward without the slightest bit of nervousness and said lightly, "Congratulations on becoming the new Slaughtering Hand." The Slaughtering Hand? Nye Tian frowned, but his aura kept rising. The black-clothed man actually laughed and said, "Those who have the slaughter order are the Slaughtering Hand. The Slaughtering Hand is qualified to participate in the Slaughtering Road. Once you come out of the Slaughtering Road, you will be the Slaughtering King. The Black Lotus welcomes you at any time to become the slaughtering king. Tian frowned slightly and immediately understood that these people in front of him were from the Black Lotus. Without a doubt, the slaughter order in Yu Feilong's hand was given by these people. Why do you want to kill him? Tian's eyes darkened and he asked coldly. The path of slaughter is the secret of the Black Lotus. It must not be taken away. The man in black's voice became low and said, He knows too many things, so he must not be allowed to leave the dark mountain range alive. Tian frowned and said coldly, According to what you said, if I become the new slaughtering hand, I won't be able to leave the dark mountain range alive? Not necessarily. The man in black was very calm and said, As long as you can win in the path of slaughter and become the slaughtering king, you will be qualified to leave this place. Here, the man in black paused and said, But if you want to enter the path of slaughter, you must first activate the slaughter order. The slaughter order in your hand still needs 13 blood marks to be activated. Hurry up. After saying that, the man in black turned around and was about to leave. Wait. Tian took a step forward and his sword aura rose up. His eyes were cold and stern. Did I say you can leave? What do you want? The man in black was stunned for a moment. Feeling Tian's killing intent, he said, Don't tell me you still want to kill us? Do you know that we are the Black Lotus envoys? The Black Lotus emissary was a small title, but it represented a powerful status. It was precisely because of his identity that the black-clothed man did not put Tian in his eyes at all. He did not believe that Tian would dare to kill him. The Black Lotus emissary? Tianling let out an indifferent smile. The disdain in his eyes intensified as he said in a heavy tone, I don't care who you are. I only know that you killed my friend. So, all of you must die today. A voice that was as cold as iron resounded in the void, surging with terrifying killing intent and battle intent. These Black Lotus envoys had killed Yu Feilong, so how could Tian let them leave alive? Do you really want to kill us? The man in black frowned slightly and a trace of horror finally appeared on his face. You're right. My decimation medallion is still lacking 13 blood runes. Then I'll use your lives to fill those 13 blood runes. With a sinister smile, Tian's decimation medallion appeared in his hand. Terrifying black runes surged out of his body as he used his 3 forbidden arts at the same time. At the same time, his tri-evil sword vein began to circulate. Wild sword intent surged in the air, filling the surrounding 10,000 meters with a terrifying killing intent. The black-clothed man frowned slightly. Tian's strength had exceeded his expectations. Die! Tian roared, slashing down with the starlight heaven slash. A mountainous sword image tore through the sky like a collapsing pillar, shaking heaven and earth. This! The black-clothed man's eyes widened, and the fear on his face intensified. He wanted to fight back, but found himself surrounded by a powerful sword aura that made it difficult for him to even circulate his key meridians. Tian was currently a late overgod. Coupled with the tri-evil sword seal, a single strike from him was enough to slay an early overgod. The black-clothed man was only a peak overgod. There was no way he could withstand a single strike from Tian. Boom! The sword image fell, and the black-clothed man's body was swallowed up by the sword intent. Not even his bones were left, and he was reduced to a bloody mist. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Tian would actually dare to kill an emissary in the obscure mountain range. In the instant that the black-clothed man died, a thin streak of blood-red light appeared and entered the decimation medallion. One of the slots was instantly filled to the brim. What? The other men in black all took a deep breath in. They were all frightened. They couldn't believe that Tian had killed an emissary just like that. Furthermore, Tian's strength was extremely strange. He had instantly risen from mid-overgod to late overgod. He killed an emissary. Let's attack together and kill him. However, these envoys were experienced cultivators, and quickly calmed down. They roared in unison and launched attacks at the same time. In the next moment, an incomparably vast and mighty aura appeared and crashed down on Nietian like raging waves. Nietian's face sank. There was no fear in his eyes at all. Instead, his battle intent became even more intense. He took a step forward, and his blood chi stimulated his sword intent, causing his sword aura to soar once again. Following that, the astral heavenly slash down, and boundless sword intent instantly condensed into a 5,000 to 6,000 meter long sword image. The boundless sword intent seemed to have solidified as it slashed towards the dozen Black Lotus envoys. The emissaries were stunned. They had never thought that Nietian would be so powerful. He was actually able to take on the combined attacks of over a dozen peak overgods all by himself. Young Master! Jingchen was stunned as well. He was unable to react for a moment. He growled out and wanted to strike out again, but it was too late. Rumble! In the next moment, the two extremely terrifying powers collided. Immediately, the shock waves exploded and spread out in all directions. The entire sky was enveloped by the terrifying power. Jian Jingyun and the others were completely stunned by the scene in the sky. Nietian's battle prowess was unbelievable. It was unimaginable. Jian Jingyun knew that he could take on 2 or even 3 peak overgod cultivators at the same time. However, he definitely could not take on a dozen peak overgod cultivators all by himself like Nietian had done. Nietian was just too terrifying. It was chilling. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Rumbles and ear-piercing sounds constantly rang out in the sky. Terrifying power wreaked havoc in the space, causing waves of air to explode. A long while later, the surging waves of air dispersed, and 2 figures appeared in the sky. Nietian stood in the air as sword intent surged around him. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He seemed like a sword that could kill. On the other side, the emissaries were in an extremely horrible shape. Blood flowed from the corner of their lips, and their faces were filled with shock and embarrassment. They looked at Nietian in shock and fear. It had never occurred to them that they would be defeated by Nietian, even though they had joined forces. Nietian was unscathed, but they were all injured. How is this possible? A while later, someone returned to their senses and cried out. Their faces were still stiff. Chapter 1814. Boom. In the void, the sword shadow was like a mountain, pressing down on the group of Black Lotus cultivators. In an instant, all the Black Lotus cultivators felt an immense pressure, to the point where they felt like they couldn't breathe. At this moment, the smell of death was so real. Boom. However, at this moment, a flaming arrow appeared in the sky, whistling over like a huge meteor. Nietian suddenly felt the pressure, and his eyes darkened. Then, astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he retreated. Boom! In the next moment, there was an explosion as the mighty sword shadow and the flaming arrow collided. A terrifying shock wave exploded, turning into surging shock waves that spread in all directions. The frightening power filled the space within 10,000 meters. Nietian felt the terrifying pressure, and his figure retreated. He finally avoided the direct impact, but he was still affected by the aftershock. His body swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. You again. Nietian steadied himself, and he suddenly raised his head to look at the black-robed figure in the sky. It was the Spirit Arrow Warrior who had appeared twice before. This was the third time the Spirit Arrow Warrior had appeared, and every time he appeared, it was to kill. The first 2 times were against Jingchen, and this time, it was against Nietian. The Black Lotus envoys retreated, and after stabilizing themselves in the air, they all looked at the Spirit Arrow Warrior and cried out in unison, Lotus Master! Lotus Master? Nietian was taken aback, and then he remembered that Xiang Tsangxuan had told him that the Black Lotus had a Black Lotus King and 12 Lotus Masters. So this person was one of the 12 Black Lotus Masters. The Black Lotus was indeed terrifying. A mere Lotus Master had the strength of a late-stage paramount god. It seemed that the Black Lotus King had the strength of a peak paramount god. Such a deep foundation was comparable to the peak forces of the upper three realms. Just as Nye Tian was feeling bewildered, Jing Chen rushed to Nye Tian's side and asked nervously, "Young master, are you all right?" Nye Tian nodded slightly, indicating that he was fine. Far in the sky, the Lotus Master saw that Nye Tian was not dead and couldn't help but frown. He obviously did not expect Nye Tian's martial body to be so strong. Nye Tian used the three forbidden techniques, and his strength reached late over God. His martial body strengthened as well, becoming even more powerful than experts like Jing Chen. "It's you again. I, Jing Chen, will definitely kill you today." After confirming that Nye Tian was fine, Jing Chen roared and charged towards the Lotus Master. He had almost died at the hands of this Lotus Master twice. His hatred for the latter was obvious. He wished he could tear the latter into pieces before burning his bones to ashes. Jing Chen. When Nye Tian saw Jing Chen rushing over, he was worried that the latter would have an accident, so he shouted and then transmitted his voice to Sakura. "Sakura, go and help." "Okay." Sakura agreed. His small figure appeared and flew toward Jing Chen. Jing Chen had not fully recovered his strength yet, so it was rather difficult for him to deal with the Lotus Master alone. However, with Sakura it was more than enough. Nye Tian no longer paid any attention to the Lotus Master. His murderous gaze locked onto the envoys of Black Lotus. "Brothers, this kid has been injured by the Lotus Master. Let's kill him together." The expressions of the envoys changed, and one of them cried out. His aura surged, causing the space there to tremble slightly. "All right." The other envoys roared out at the same time. They thought that Nye Tian must have been quite injured from the clash with the Lotus Master. Now was the best time to strike. "You're looking to die." Nye Tianling's eyes flickered with cold light. He roared out and then slashed out, sky-devouring blood. The presence of blood and sword intent surged. A blood-red sword appeared in the air and slashed towards the envoys. When the envoys saw this, they all struck out. Over a dozen strands of power fused into one, condensing into a terrifying palm that fell. In that instant, the sky changed color and dark clouds surged. Kaboom! The moment the sword and palm collided, terrifying power wreaked havoc. With a violent explosion, it was like a clap of thunder. Immediately, surging waves of air swept out, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. Jian Jingyun and the others tensed up. Their hearts leapt to their throats, and they even forgot to help out. Hiss, 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 hiss. Piercing sounds constantly rang out in the surroundings. The surging waves of air only dissipated after a long time. A figure stood in the air like a god of death, descending upon the world. However, the envoys of Black Lotus had vanished. They had all been swallowed up by the sword, all dying a horrible death. With just a single strike, Nye Tian had directly slain over a dozen peak-over gods. Such terrifying battle prowess was shocking. Jian Jingyun and the others were completely stunned. They were stunned, and they were speechless for quite a while. Spurt! At that moment, Nye Tian's figure swayed, and he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. Nye Tian had used up all his strength to kill over a dozen Black Lotus envoys. He had used up a lot of blood, and his body was already in a weakened state. He took a deep breath and withdrew his aura. The forbidden skill rune then disappeared. At that moment, Nye Tian glanced at the massacre medallion in his hand. It was flashing with a strange blood-red glow. He sensed that the 100 blood-red slots in the massacre medallion had already been filled. The 100 blood-red lines had been successfully absorbed, and the rune had been activated. Nye Tian did not have the time to look at it. He immediately put the massacre medallion away and turned his attention to the other battlefield. High up in the sky, three figures were fighting fiercely. Under the combined attack of Sakura Tian and Jing Chen, The Lotus Master could no longer hold on. She was covered in blood, and her body was trembling. However, she was still fighting on her last breath. "I'll kill you!" Jingchen roared and slammed his palm down. Tens of thousands of thistles and thorns appeared and condensed into a terrifying sharp claw in the air, slamming down on the Lotus Master. The Lotus Master was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If this palm fell, she would definitely die. "Don't kill him!" Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes could not help but turn gloomy, and then he screamed. Jing Chen wanted to retract his palm when he heard Nie Tian's words, but it was too late. Boom! At the critical moment, a sword shadow appeared and fell from the sky, directly shattering the giant palm in the air. That was close. Jing Chen let out a long sigh of relief. He glanced at Socration and nodded slightly. If not for Socration's timely intervention, the Lotus Master would have been killed by Jing Chen's palm. "Young Master!" Jing Chen shouted when he saw Nie Tian's figure appear. He asked doubtfully, "Why didn't you kill him?" Nie Tian smiled faintly and locked his gaze on the Lotus Master. He said playfully, "He's one of the 12 Black Lotus Masters. He must know a lot of things. Killing him just like that would be too easy on him." Chapter 18:15. The Master of the Lotus Sect stared at Nie Tian with a gloomy look on her face. Even if he were to die, he would not reveal any information about the Black Lotus to Nie Tian. "You sure have guts." Nie Tianling snickered as the corner of his lips curled up. His eyes darkened and he said in a low voice, "I don't want to know about the Black Lotus. Why don't you tell me why you are here?" As soon as he spoke, a wave of sword energy shot out and pierced through the Lotus leader's shoulder. Fresh blood gushed out. Nie Tian didn't have the habit of torturing people. However, if the Lotus leader didn't know what was good for him, he had no choice but to do it. Nie Tian really wanted to know why the Lotus leader was here to kill him. Also, the Lotus leader's target was very clear. It was obvious that he was here for Nie Tian and the others. "Ah!" The Lotus leader screamed in pain. His voice was extremely sharp, but he gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. "You're not going to say anything?" Nie Tian snickered coldly. Another wave of sword energy shot out and another bloody hole appeared on the Lotus leader's body. "You want me to speak with just some physical pain? What a joke!" The Lotus leader guffawed as his face turned ferocious. Ordinary physical pain was indeed nothing to a martial artist with a firm and determined mind. However, the 2 bloody holes that Nie Tian left on the Lotus leader's body weren't that simple. "Since you aren't afraid of physical pain, let me show you the power of the Forbidden Technique rune." Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then, with a thought, a mass of talisman symbols appeared in his palm and entered the body of the Lotus Master. What did you do to me?" The Lotus leader was extremely shocked and his eyes trembled as he shouted. "Don't panic. You'll find out soon enough." Nie Tianling snickered. In the next moment, the Forbidden Technique rune turned violent and rushed into the Lotus leader's body. "Ah!" The Lotus leader screamed in pain. The Lotus leader's entire body twisted and contorted. It was as if there were thousands of ants biting his body and soul, trying to tear his body and soul apart. This pain was beyond the Lotus Master's imagination. His spiritual consciousness was on the verge of collapsing. Stop right now!" The Lotus Master screamed and begged for mercy. "Now, can we have a good talk?" Nie Tian smiled faintly, his eyes flashing with coldness. The power of the Forbidden Technique rune was indeed not something an ordinary person could withstand. Back when Nie Tian was fusing with the Forbidden rune, the pain he endured was far greater than what Lotus Lord had endured, but he managed to endure it with his strong willpower. It turned out that Nie Tian's fusion with the Forbidden rune was of great help to him. Without the 3 forbidden magics, he would have a hard time fighting godlords, let alone paramount gods. "Speak, Lotus Master. Why do you want to kill me?" Nie Tian smiled coldly, his eyes filled with disdain. "Fiend god nascent embryo. The Lotus leader spoke in a low voice. Immediately after, a strange energy gushed out of his body. Not good. Nie Tian's eyes grew grim as he realized something. However, it was already too late to make a move. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, and the Lotus leader's body exploded into a pool of blood. The Lotus leader was a man of integrity. He would rather self-destruct than reveal any information to Nie Tian. But before he died, he uttered 4 words: Fiend God Nascent Embryo. Nie Tian's heart sank and his expression flickered. A god-devil nascent embryo. He had never imagined that the Lotus leader would know about the fiend god nascent embryo. Don't tell me he's trying to kill me because of the fiend god nascent embryo? Nie Tian frowned, his eyes flashing. He couldn't figure out how the Lotus leader knew about the fiend god nascent embryo. Even as Nie Tian was wondering what was going on, something else was happening in a hidden valley in the dark mountain range. A figure stood in the middle of the valley, his entire body hidden in darkness. His entire face radiated an aura of darkness. At this moment, the figure's aura was restrained, but his cold eyes were trembling slightly, as if he was extremely agitated. Old Nine is dead. After a long time, the figure murmured. His tone was filled with shock and disbelief. The Old Nine he mentioned was the Lotus leader who had just self-destructed. He was ranked 9th among the 12 Lotus leaders. He didn't expect the Lotus leader to be dead. This person's identity was terrifying. Within the Black Lotus, his status was second only to the Black Lotus King. He was the leader of the 12 Lotus leaders and was known as the Lotus leader. The death of the Lotus leader had shocked the Lotus leader. Although the Lotus leader wasn't the strongest among the 12 Lotus leaders, his assassination skills were definitely the best. A few days ago, the Lotus leader had gone to kill Nie Tian. The Lotus leader had thought that the Lotus leader would be able to complete the mission quickly. He didn't expect the Lotus leader to die on the mission. Who is the person that the Black Lotus King wants to kill? And what is the fiend god nascent embryo that the Old Nine mentioned before he died? The Lotus leader frowned, his eyeballs moving around in a strange manner. Killing Nie Tian was a direct order from the Black Lotus King. The Lotus leader couldn't understand what kind of person could make the Black Lotus King care so much. Let's leave this place first and report everything to the Black Lotus King. After thinking for a long time, the Lotus leader moved and left the valley. On the other side, Nie Tian frowned. He faintly felt that he had fallen into a huge trap. "Young master, are you all right?" Jing Qin asked when he saw that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right. Nie Tian shook his head slightly and forced a smile. Everything that had happened in the obscure mountain range was getting weirder and weirder. This made Nie Tian feel pressured. When Socratian returned to the 9 superbs, Nie Tian took out the massacre order. His eyes flickered and he murmured, "The massacre order has been activated. Young master, we have just killed the people of the Black Lotus. Do we still have to participate in the massacre path?" Jing Qin stepped forward and asked Nie Tian. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. Their purpose in entering the obscure mountain range was to find the ghost Marshal Wild Sand. Before they found him, they had to continue. Nie Tian had a vague feeling that there might be a huge secret hidden in the massacre path. Let's see what happens after the massacre order is activated. Nie Tian calmed down and stopped thinking about other things. He used his divine sense to explore the massacre order and immediately locked on the activated rune. Boom! Nie Tian moved his mind. The rune in the massacre order sensed it and immediately released a ray of light. The light spread in the air and formed a spherical formation with a radius of several meters. Nie Tian was stunned. He felt a strong space-time aura from the formation. His expression changed and he said in astonishment, "This is a space-time formation." Space-time formation? The others were stunned and their eyes revealed surprise. Who would have thought that there was a space-time formation hidden in the massacre order? "Young master, where does the space-time formation lead to?" Jing Chen asked Nie Tian with a puzzled look. Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he murmured, "If I'm not wrong, this space-time formation leads to the massacre path." The massacre path. Jing Chen and the others were stunned and their faces were obviously stiff. Chapter 1816. Nie Tian looked at the space-time formation in front of him. His eyes trembled slightly and released blazing rays of light. He was a little surprised that there was a space-time formation hidden in the massacre token. He guessed that the space-time formation in front of him must lead to the path of massacre. "Young master, are we going to enter the space-time formation?" Jing Chen was a little excited and asked nervously. He had stayed in Black Wind Cliff for more than half a year and had not found any information. Nie Tian had only been here for a day and had actually found the way to the path of massacre. It was really too surprising. With a faint smile, Nie Tian said, "There's no need to rush." With a thought, he withdrew the space-time portal into his slaughter command. Nie Tian put the massacre token away and swept his eyes across Jing Chen and the others. He frowned and seemed to be thinking about something. Now that the massacre token was activated, Nie Tian and the others could enter the path of massacre. However, he had to think clearly about what to do next. Nie Tian speculated that a massacre token could only allow one person to enter the path of massacre. So the question in front of him now was whether or not he should find a few more medallions of slaughter. Nie Tian had the 9 extremities in his hands, so he could let others enter the 9 extremities. After thinking for a long time, Nie Tian made a choice. He was going to find 2 more massacre tokens and give them to Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan respectively. As for Jing Chen and Rui Qianyu, they would enter the 9 extremities first. Nie Tian did not understand the path of massacre at all, so he had to make the most cautious arrangements. "This is a small world that I created. It's called the 9 extremities." Nie Tian took out the 9 extremities and with a thought, a space-time passage appeared. He looked at Jing Chen and Rui Qianyu and said, "Jing Chen, Qianyu, you two enter the 9 extremities first." "Yes." Jing Chen was stunned at first and then understood. It turned out that Sakura had been hiding in the 9 extremities. He nodded in agreement and stepped into the space-time passage, entering the 9 extremities. Rui Qianyu nodded and entered the 9 extremities as well. In the 9 extremities world, there were exotic flowers and plants everywhere, and the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth and the spirit energy were even denser than in the outside world, which was extremely helpful to Jing Chen's recovery and Rui Qianyu's cultivation. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan were stunned as they watched from the side. They could feel the powerful space-time aura of the 9 extremities. It was hard to imagine that Nie Tian could actually control such a powerful world. The 9 extremes were created by Nie Tian. On the cosmos lines of the 9 extremes world, Nie Tian's soul imprint was left behind. Naturally, he could control the 9 extremes. "Nie Tian, what should we do?" Gui Wukan took a step forward, excitement appearing on his face. He was very glad that he had come to the realm of darkness with Nie Tian. If he had been by himself, it would have been impossible for him to reach this step. "Let's go find 2 slaughtering orders first." Nie Tian faintly smiled and said, "The 3 of us need 3 slaughtering orders. As for the remaining 2, we need to get them as soon as possible." Nie Tian had just killed more than a dozen Black Lotus envoys. Moreover, a Lotus Master had also died here. The people from the Black Lotus would arrive soon. It was not a good idea to stay here for long. "All right. Let's go to the Black Wind restaurant. There must be someone with a slaughtering order there." Gui Wukan smiled mischievously. He turned around and prepared to go to the Black Wind restaurant. "There's no need to go." Just as Gui Wukan turned around, Nie Tian called out to him. With a strange smile, he said, "Someone has delivered a slaughtering order to our doorstep." As he spoke, Nie Tian looked towards a dense forest. The corner of his mouth curled into an evil smile. Nie Tian sensed that the 100 blood traces on the slaughtering order had suddenly reacted. It was as if they had sensed something and became extremely violent. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wukan were stunned on the spot. They couldn't sense anything. They're here. Just as they were feeling puzzled, a violent roar suddenly rang out from the distant forest. Following that, a figure rushed over. In an instant, he was less than 1,000 meters away from Nie Tian and the others. In the next moment, 2 black-clothed figures appeared behind this person. 2 pairs of cold eyes stared at Nie Tian and the others with heavy killing intent. So the slaughtering orders can also sense each other. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He immediately understood that these people were here for the slaughtering orders in his hands. Just now, Nie Tian felt that the slaughtering orders had become extremely violent. So it turned out that it had sensed other slaughtering orders. There really is a slaughtering order. The person in the lead smiled coldly. He took a step forward and released a powerful aura from his body. His eyes were slightly blood-red. The bloodthirsty killing intent was extremely dense. The leading black-clothed person glanced past Nie Tian and the others with a sunken gaze. He said coldly, "Damned brat, if you're smart, call out the slaughtering orders. Don't force me to take action." Nie Tian raised an eyebrow. His gaze was extremely disdainful. He did not take the 3 of them seriously at all. The 3 black-clothed people were all peak over God. Unfortunately, their opponent was Nie Tian. "Kid, looks like you're forcing me to kill someone." The man in black growled and sneered. "You only have 2 peak over gods, while we have 3 peak over gods. You want to fight back with just you? You're looking to die." With that, he waved his hand and the other 2 stepped forward. Their auras surged, and killing intent appeared in their eyes. Nie Tian laughed. He looked at Gui Wukan and said, "I'll leave these 3 to you." "All right," Gui Wukan replied. He took a step forward, and sword force surged from his body. The 3 black-clothed people were suddenly stunned. Seeing that only Gui Wukan was going to attack, they could not help but look at each other and snigger. "This brat is looking to die." The 3 of them did not hesitate and directly attacked. 3 surging palm force shot towards Gui Wukan. Gui Wukan's lips curled into a cold smile. He suddenly stabbed out with the Octotera Ghost martial sword, and a deep sword seal rang out in the air. Afterwards, the sword blur shot over like a dragon. Boom! There was an explosion in the air, and the 3 figures were all sent flying. The leading black-clothed person died on the spot. The other 2 black-clothed people gasped when they saw this. They immediately turned around and fled. Gui Wukan sneered. He moved and stabbed out with his sword. 2 sword blurs fell and directly ended the lives of the 2 black-clothed people. Although the 3 of them were peak over gods, there was a huge gap between them and the Black Lotus envoy from before. Nie Tian and Jian Jingyun watched from the side. They could not help but look at each other and exclaim together, "The realm of the Sword of Oblivion." Gui Wukan instantly killed 3 opponents of the same level. It was not only because he was powerful, but also because he had just advanced to the realm of the Sword of Oblivion. Not long ago, Gui Wukan was still at the realm of Sword Essence. Unknowingly, he had actually reached the realm of the Sword of Oblivion. His talent in the way of the sword was astonishing. The current Gui Wukan's battle prowess should be similar to Jian Jingyun's. At most, he was slightly weaker. Gui Wukan sniggered and took a step forward. He raised his hand, and 3 massacre medallions appeared in his hand. They only needed 2 massacre medallions. Now that they had 3, there was one more. Chapter 1817. Different. Nie Tian couldn't help being stunned when he heard Gui Wukan's words. He quickly walked over and held the 3 slaughter orders in his hand. After comparing them, he found that they were indeed different. The 3 slaughter orders looked similar on the surface, but the patterns on their backs were different. Nie Tian then took out the slaughter medallion that had been injured and compared it to his own. The pattern on its back was also different. These patterns were very strange. At first glance, they looked similar, but after careful observation, there was a huge difference. Nye Tian, can you tell what these patterns are? Gui Wushan looked at Nye Tian for a long time, but he couldn't tell what these patterns were. Nye Tian shook his head and said, "These patterns seem to be some kind of rune. I've never seen such a thing before." Fat, have you seen this pattern before? Nye Tian asked Fat Cat. I've never seen him before. Little Fat Cat replied coldly. Nye Tian was stunned. He looked at Fat Cat. The latter's face was solemn, as if she was thinking about something. There was a faint trace of fear in her eyes. Nye Tian was puzzled. He had never seen Fat Cat with such an expression. This wasn't the latter's character. Could it be that Fat saw something? Nye Tian guessed in his heart. But Fat Cat wasn't willing to say, so he couldn't do anything. Since he couldn't understand the patterns on the back of the slaughter orders, Nye Tian could only give up and let Gui Wushan keep the slaughter orders. Nye Tian faintly felt that the patterns on the back of the slaughter orders must be hiding some secret. Otherwise, Fat Cat wouldn't have such a reaction. After getting the slaughter orders, Nye Tian no longer hesitated. With a thought, the space-time array appeared. Let's enter. Nye Tian nodded with a smile and stepped into the space-time array. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan followed behind him. The instant the three of them entered the space-time formation, space trembled slightly, and the three of them disappeared. In the hinterland of the dark mountain range, there was a dark city. The huge city gate was like a giant beast with its mouth wide open, wanting to swallow everyone who entered. At this moment, three figures appeared in midair, looking down at the dark city below with shock and astonishment. These three people were none other than Nye Tian, Jian Jingyun, and Gui Wuchan. What is this place? Gui Wukan asked in astonishment as he looked around. Nye Tian calmed down a little. He stared at the dark city below and said, "Let's enter the city first." The city below was extremely vast. It had a circumference of 1,000 miles, and the city walls were hundreds of meters tall. Furthermore, they were made of black stone, causing the darkness aura in the city to be even denser. Nye Tian and the other two landed outside the city gate. Nye Tian was also very curious about where they had come to. He originally thought that he would directly appear in the path of slaughter. Slaughter City. Standing outside the city gate, Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help flickering as he saw the 4 large words on the city gate. So the city in front of him was called Slaughter City. Slaughter City, what a bloody name! Gui Wushan couldn't help frowning as he looked at the 4 words. Nye Tian's expression was gloomy as he walked towards Slaughter City. When he was about 1,000 meters away from Slaughter City, Nye Tian's expression slightly changed. He could sense that Slaughter City was enveloped by a huge formation. Although the aura of this formation wasn't obvious, it gave people a feeling of boundlessness. Stop! At this moment, a low voice rang out on the city wall. Following that, a guard appeared and coldly stared at Nye Tian and the others. He said in a deep voice, "Who are you people?" Nye Tian slightly creased his brows. He didn't say a word and took out the mandate of slaughter. When the guard saw the mandate of slaughter, he couldn't help but sneer and said, "Envoy Black Lotus Insight is getting worse and worse." He actually gave the mandate of slaughter to a high god trash. Open the city gate. Nye Tian creased his brows. He didn't pay attention to the guard's ridicule and said in a deep voice. At this moment, a few people in the same attire appeared beside the guard. "Kid, Slaughter City isn't that easy to enter. Only experts who have truly experienced the baptism of slaughter are qualified to enter Slaughter City," one of the guards shouted. "A trash like you should just die." As he spoke, the guard's figure suddenly moved. He directly leapt off the city wall and sent a palm strike directly at Nye Tian. Nye Tian's gaze froze. He completely didn't expect that this guard would directly attack him. The people of Slaughter City would never give you a reason. If they wanted to kill, they would kill. They did not need a reason. You're looking to die. In the next moment, Nietion's eyes turned cold. Killing intent filled his eyes. Since the guard wanted to kill him, there was no need for him to show mercy. The guard was not powerful. He was only a late over god. He really had no idea where he found the courage to kill so arrogantly. Unfortunately, he was very unlucky this time. The person he encountered was Nietion. Nietion shuddered, and forbidden inscriptions surged from his body. Endless dragon aura surged out, and he threw a punch. The figure of a dragon appeared and surged out. The dragon's might shook the sky. Boom! There was a great rumble in the air. The figure of the dragon surged into the sky and directly swallowed the guard. A blood-red light appeared in the air. The guard did not even have the time to let out a final howl before he died. Even a piece of trash like you can enter Slaughter City. Why can't I? Nietion suddenly raised his head. The corner of his lips twitched, and his gaze was so cold that it was chilling. The guards on the city walls were completely stunned when they saw this. They looked at Nietion with trembling eyes as shock was written all over their faces. Open the city gates. At this moment, Nietion looked at the guards and said sternly. Slaughter City was protected by terrifying formations, so he could not barge in forcefully. He needed to open the city gates before he could enter. This brat killed Liang Qing. Only now did the guards return to their senses. They cried out as fear filled their eyes. Nietion frowned. He looked at the guards and growled, "Open the city gates! Brat, you've killed our people. Do you still want to enter Slaughter City?" One of the guards finally calmed down. He looked sinisterly at Nietion and roared, "Brat, you can't enter Slaughter City. You'd better obediently prepare to die." Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't know what this guard meant. At this time, a horn suddenly appeared in the guard's hand. A cold, killing intent rose from the corner of his mouth. "Liang Shun, what are you doing?" The other guards panicked when they saw this. They shouted, "The slaughter horn cannot be used carelessly. If it alarms the herd of beasts in the mountain range, we'll be finished." "Don't worry, I'm just playing with them." The guard called Liang Shun smiled coldly and immediately blew the slaughter horn. Whoa! A deep and powerful bugle horn resounded, spreading towards the mountain range surrounding Slaughter City. Nietion frowned. He did not know what this Liang Shun was doing. "Brat, obediently accept your death." After a while, Liang Shun put down the horn and glared venomously at Nietion. Chapter 1818. Outside of Slaughter City, Nietion suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the distant mountains. His face changed, and he knew something was wrong. "Nietion, what's going on?" Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan asked nervously when they saw Nietion's strange expression. Nietion frowned, and turned to look at the mountains behind him. Bang! 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 Then, a rapid and low muffled sound rang out, as if there was a huge wild beast running wildly. "What's that?" Gui Wushan suddenly saw a huge black shadow in front of them. It was like a mountain, and it was crazily rushing towards them. "Be careful, get ready to attack," Nietion said with a gloomy face. "There's more than one." In the next moment, Jian Jingyun also realized that something was wrong. In the distance, behind the huge black shadow, 2 more black shadows appeared. 3 black shadows rushed over, and the ground was raised into the sky by tens of meters. What a strong aura! Nietion felt a strong pressure, and he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Then, he finally saw the faces of the 3 black shadows. They were 3 huge black apes, and they were about 100 meters long. Their bodies were pitch black, and their fur was glossy. They were surrounded by a terrifying and ruthless aura. The strangest thing was that the black apes had 4 eyes, and each eye was surging with a terrifying and violent aura. The black apes' bodies weren't big, and many spiritual beasts were bigger than them. But their aura was very strong, and their bodies seemed to be made of steel. They looked like black mountains. Nietion guessed that the black apes were rank 6 or 7 divine beasts, and their strength was comparable to a peak over god, or even an early paramount god. It turned out that the guard named Liang Shun had used the slaughter horn to attract the black apes. Stinking brat, that's a four-eyed ferocious ape, a real rank 7 divine beast, and its strength is comparable to an early paramount god. Let's see if you can survive. Ha ha! Liang Shun stood on the city wall and laughed out loud. He could already see Nye Tian and the others being torn into pieces by the four-eyed violent ape. Nye Tian didn't have the time to pay attention to Liang Shun. His eyes were fixed on the largest four-eyed ferocious ape. Black runes gushed out from his body, and his aura continued to rise. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan had also locked onto a four-eyed ferocious ape and were prepared to take action. The guards on the city walls all stared at Nye Tian. They could sense that Nye Tian's strength was rapidly increasing. In just the blink of an eye, he had gone from mid-high god to late over god. This strange scene caused the guards to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. They had no idea how Nye Tian did it. Bang! 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 At this time, the four-eyed violent ape was getting closer and closer to Nye Tian and the others. The sword moves around Nye Tian's body surged like tempestuous waves, violent and murderous. Roar! The largest four-eyed violent ape let out a thunderous roar. It suddenly slammed its four hooves, causing the ground to sink a little. Its huge body leapt up, and its two huge claws glowed with a cold light as they slammed towards Nye Tian. The four-eyed violent ape was a 7th-rank divine beast. Its body was extremely tough. Even a mountain would be flattened if it were to land on it. Nye Tian's expression was calm. His eyes were like a cold lake, without the slightest ripple. Earthen deceit. Just when the four-eyed violent ape reached the highest point, Nye Tian let out a deep roar. Sword intent instantly condensed around his body, and a blur of a sword whistled out. It was like a huge dragon, and it slammed towards the four-eyed violent ape. Rumble! With a loud sound, the blur of the sword struck the four-eyed violent ape's body. The ape's body froze slightly, and it stopped in the air. Afterwards, it directly passed through the blur of the sword and slammed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned. The astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he retreated several thousand meters away. Kaboom! The four-eyed violent ape landed on the ground, and the ground shook violently. A huge crater appeared, and a rolling wave of earth spread out in all directions. At the same time, Nye Tian landed on the ground. He waved his hand, and the earth around him scattered, and he stared at the four-eyed violent ape. At this moment, the four-eyed violent ape's four eyes were staring at Nye Tian. Their blood was red, and they were filled with a bloody killing intent. Nye Tian's previous attack was extremely powerful. It was enough to instantly kill a peak over god, and even heavily injure an early-stage paramount god. However, it hadn't hurt the four-eyed violent ape. Not only was the four-eyed violent ape powerful, its defense was even more terrifying. Nye Tian estimated that the four-eyed violent ape's strength was comparable to a peak over god, or even an early-stage paramount god. However, its defense was even stronger than a mid-stage paramount god. Even if Nye Tian used his 3 great forbidden skills, he still wouldn't be able to harm the four-eyed violent ape. Nye Tian glanced at Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan. The four-eyed violent ape they were facing was slightly weaker, and they could still resist it. However, if the battle dragged on, they wouldn't be able to hold on. Nye Tian didn't want Jingchen or Sakura to appear. There were too many people here. If they knew that he had something like the 9 extremities, it would be very troublesome. Roar! At this time, the four-eyed violent ape roared. Its huge body leaped up again, and it opened its bloody mouth, pressing down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian's figure moved nimbly. He stabbed out with his sword, and with the momentum of the sword, he retreated several thousand meters. When the guards on the city wall saw Nye Tian and the others fighting bitterly, they didn't smile. Instead, they were deeply shocked. They didn't expect Nie Tian and the others to be able to hold on for so long against the four-eyed violent ape. Especially Nie Tian. Just now, he was mocked as a piece of trash, but now he could actually fight against the most terrifying four-eyed violent ape. Nie Tian relied on his nimble figure to dodge the four-eyed violent ape's attacks several times. However, Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan were gradually falling into a disadvantageous position, and they couldn't hold on much longer. The four-eyed violent ape became more and more ferocious as it fought. The tyrannical aura on its body became more and more frightening, and its battle power kept rising. "We can't go on like this." Nie Tian frowned, and his expression was gloomy. The four-eyed violent ape's defense was too strong. Even if Nie Tian used his full strength, he wouldn't be able to cause any damage to it. "Do I really have to let Sakura take action?" Nie Tian pondered in his heart, and his eyes flickered. Nie Tian, the four-eyed violent ape's weakness is its eyes. Get close to it and destroy its eyes. At this time, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded, reminding Nie Tian. Eyes. Nie Tian's eyes lit up, and he immediately stared at the four-eyed violent ape's four eyes. Roar! The four-eyed violent ape let out a low roar, and its huge body pressed over once again. Its speed and aura were much stronger than before. However, this time, Nie Tian didn't dodge. The astral soul wings on his back flapped, and his silhouette was like the wind and lightning, rushing straight towards the four-eyed violent ape. Huh? Is this brat crazy? The guards on the city wall were stunned when they saw this scene, and they exclaimed in horror. From their point of view, Nie Tian's action was no different from courting death. As Nie Tian neared the four-eyed violent ape, he instantly felt the terrifying aura rushing towards him. The skin on his body directly split open, and fresh blood flowed out crazily. He was only a few meters away from the four-eyed violent ape. At such a close distance, the strength of the impact was unimaginable. Chapter 1819. In midair, Nie Tian approached the four-eyed ferocious ape and used his physical body to resist the impact of the four-eyed ferocious ape's aura. Suddenly, he stabbed out with his sword, and a cold sword shadow exploded towards the four-eyed ferocious ape's four eyes. The moment the sword shadow shot out, the four-eyed ferocious ape seemed to have sensed danger. It let out a strange howl, and its blood-red eyes revealed a terrified expression. Its huge body actually wanted to retreat. But unfortunately, Nie Tian was too close to the four-eyed ferocious ape. At this distance, how could he miss? Pooh! 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 The moment the sword shadow landed on the four-eyed ferocious ape's face, the sword intent burst forth like thousands of sharp blades, piercing into the four-eyed ferocious ape's eyes. Immediately, the four-eyed ferocious ape's four eyes exploded, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. An incomparably ruthless aura was released, filling the air. Nie Tian's sword strike had succeeded. He forcefully unfurled the wings on his back, and his figure immediately retreated 1,000 meters away. Oh whoa! The four-eyed ferocious ape's four eyes exploded, and it immediately let out a deafening howl. Its huge body actually stood up, and its two front claws covered its face. It was in incomparable pain, and its body violently jumped around, causing the ground to rumble and tremble. When the guards on the city wall saw this scene, they were simply dumbfounded. They couldn't believe their eyes, and they all looked at the crazy four-eyed ferocious ape with sluggish expressions. After a moment, the four-eyed ferocious ape's huge body slowly fell, and finally fell into a pool of blood, no longer moving. Nie Tian stood in midair, and when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief, and his tensed face relaxed a lot. He forcefully rushed to the four-eyed ferocious ape's side, and his own injuries weren't light. Fortunately, the four-eyed ferocious ape was finally dead. Jian Jingyun, Gui Wuchan, the eyes are the four-eyed ferocious ape's weakness. Nie Tian looked at Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan, and shouted to remind them. The other two four-eyed ferocious apes were smaller, and their strength was also relatively weaker. Nie Tian didn't need to do anything, and Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan could also kill them. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan immediately nodded their heads and attacked simultaneously. Two sword shadows shot out at the same time towards the two four-eyed ferocious apes. They went straight for the four-eyed ferocious ape's eyes. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan were both swordsmen who had reached the level of sword oblivion. Combined with their peak over god strength, they were strong enough to fight early paramount gods. Pooh! As the two sword shadows fell, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard in the air, followed by the hysterical howls of the four-eyed violent ape. The two violent apes roared, but their bodies were trembling. They struggled a few times with great difficulty before finally falling to the ground and dying in a pool of blood. Huff! Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan looked at each other, before exhaling a mouthful of turbid air. The two of them moved and arrived at Nie Tian's side. When they saw him covered in blood, they asked in panic, Nie Tian, are you all right? It's nothing. It's just a flesh wound. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He circulated the devil essence in his body, and immediately, a powerful life force was released. The wounds on his body healed in an instant. After fusing the devil essence with the earthstring essence, Nie Tian had a monstrous recovery ability. As long as it wasn't a fatal injury, he could recover in an instant. After recovering his martial body, Nie Tian looked at the guards on the city wall and bellowed, "Open the gates!" The guards were completely stunned. Their expressions were stiff, and they couldn't react for a long time. They never thought that Nie Tian and his group would actually kill three four-eyed ferocious apes. Let's open the gates," one of the guards said nervously, his eyes trembling. Yes, let's open the gate. He has the order to kill, we should have let him in long ago." Another guard nodded frantically. "We can't open the gates." However, the guard called Liang Shun growled, "This brat is ruthless. He has already killed Liang Qing. If we open the gates, he will definitely kill us." The other guards' expressions changed when they heard Liang Qing's words. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. If they had known that Nie Tian and his group were so powerful, they wouldn't have dared to provoke them even if they had 100 gallbladders. They were only small guards of Slaughter City. In the Black Lotus, they were the lowest and most lowly existences. Even if Nie Tian killed them, it wouldn't be a big deal. Nie Tian had the order to kill, and his current identity was the Hand of Slaughter. He was about to enter the path of slaughter. His status was much more important than a group of small guards. Then what should we do? The other guards looked at Liang Shun in unison, their faces filled with fear. Since we've already made our move, we'll do it to the end. Liang Shun's expression was gloomy. His eyes flickered with a malicious light. He took out the horn of slaughter again and said coldly, "I want to see how many four-eyed ferocious apes they can kill." "Liang Shun, are you crazy?" The other guards were stunned, their eyes filled with fear. Liang Shun clearly wanted to use the horn of slaughter to attract even more four-eyed ferocious apes. However, four-eyed ferocious apes were extremely violent divine beasts. If they accidentally attracted a group of four-eyed ferocious apes, after killing Nie Tian and his group, they would very likely attack Slaughter City. If that really happened, even if these guards had 10,000 lives, it wouldn't be enough to kill them. Liang Qing is my younger brother. I must get revenge. Liang Shun's eyes widened. He stared fixedly at Nie Tian, his expression extremely malicious. It turned out that the guard Liang Qing who had provoked Nie Tian and was killed by Nie Tian with a single sword strike was Liang Shun's younger brother. No wonder Liang Shun's killing intent towards Nie Tian was so heavy. Woo! Liang Shun hardened his heart and directly blew the horn of slaughter. Nie Tian looked at Liang Shun. His face couldn't help but sink, his eyes revealing a cold, killing intent. It was fine if this person didn't let them enter the city, but he actually used this kind of despicable method to kill them. He really deserved to die. Stinking brat, Let's see if you can survive this time. Liang Shun put down the horn of slaughter and stared at Nie Tian with a sinister gaze. He spoke in a cold voice. As the horn sounded, a moment later, a huge wave of earth rose up in the distance. A large number of huge black shadows appeared. They were like black tornadoes, sweeping towards Nie Tian and his group. Nie Tian looked over. There were dozens of four-eyed ferocious apes madly rushing over. A terrifying aura shook the heaven and earth. Waves of violent energy surged out, causing the ground to tremble as if it was about to collapse. Liang Shun, you. The other registered guards looked at Liang Shun in shock. They clearly didn't expect the latter to be so ruthless and attract dozens of four-eyed ferocious apes at once. The most frightening thing was that these dozens of four-eyed ferocious apes were each more than 100 meters tall. Obviously, they were even more powerful. This time, Liang Shun hardened his heart. He definitely had to kill Nie Tian. Dozens of four-eyed ferocious apes, such a formation, even a paramount god martial artist would be terrified if they saw it. Liang Shun predicted that this time, Nie Tian would die without a doubt. Nie Tian looked at the surging aura, his face as gloomy as water. With so many four-eyed ferocious apes, it was impossible for Nie Tian and his group to block them with just their strength. In the current situation, he only had one choice, and that was to let Di Shi Tian and Jing Chen take action. Chapter 1820. Nie Tian frowned as he looked up at the black-clothed figure in the sky. He didn't know when the black-clothed man had appeared, but Nie Tian hadn't noticed him at all. Just then, the black-clothed man's aura fluctuated, which was why Nie Tian had sensed his presence. At this time, the black-robed man's silhouette suddenly moved. Immediately after, he violently punched out with his palm. In an instant, a gigantic palm silhouette appeared in the sky. It rumbled like heavenly thunder as it smashed towards the four-eyed ferocious apes. Get out of the way! Nie Tian sensed the unfavorable situation. With a bellow, he stamped his feet, flapped his wings, and jumped thousands of meters into the air. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan also leaped into the air at the same time. Rumble! The palm fell from the sky like a mountain, emitting a thunderous rumble. On the ground, the charging four-eyed ferocious apes suddenly sensed something, and looked up. Their huge bodies slowed down. At that moment, the mighty palm fell directly into the midst of the four-eyed ferocious ape. Rumble! Crack, crack, crack. The ground within tens of thousands of meters cracked, and in the blink of an eye, waves of earth shot up into the sky. Nie Tian was shocked by the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected the black-clothed man's palm to be so terrifying. The guards on the city wall were petrified, and their mouths were wide open, but they couldn't make a sound. After a long time, the waves of earth dissipated, revealing a 10,000-meter-wide pit in the ground. The corpses of dozens of ferocious apes lay scattered in the pit, all dead. One palm. Just one palm, and dozens of ferocious apes had been killed. Looking at the scene in front of him, Nie Tian sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes trembling. The defense of the four-eyed ferocious apes was even stronger than that of a mid-stage paramount god. The fact that the black-clothed man had killed dozens of them with a single palm was terrifying. There was no doubt that the black-clothed man was at the peak of the paramount god level. Nie Tian suddenly looked up at the black-clothed man in the sky. The man was hidden under a black robe, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. However, the aura he emitted was as vast as the mountains and seas. Nie Tian was tens of thousands of meters away from the black-clothed man, but he could clearly sense the latter's aura. At that moment, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, as if he had sensed something, and his expression flickered. He sensed a familiar aura from the black-clothed man. It was Yi Qinghai's aura. Elder Hai! Nie Tian exclaimed inwardly, his body trembling slightly. He could clearly sense Yi Qinghai's aura from the black-clothed man. When Yi Qinghai left the divine realm of the heaven realm, he went to the region of darkness. However, Nie Tian sensed that, although the aura of the black-robed man was very similar to Yi Qinghai's, there were also significant differences. Therefore, he couldn't tell whether the black-robed man was Yi Qinghai or not. A voice suddenly rang out in Nie Tian's mind. It was the black-clothed man. "It's really you, Elder Hai." Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he looked at the black-clothed man. Nie Tian was taken aback. His eyes trembled as he looked at the black-robed man. "It's really you, Elder Hai." Nie Tian's perception was correct. The black-clothed man in front of him was none other than Yi Qinghai. "Young master, I can't see you right now. But remember what I said. You must become the king of carnage." Yi Qinghai transmitted again. Then, as if sensing something, he said, "Someone's coming. This old servant has to leave." With that, Yi Qinghai's body flickered and he vanished. "Elder Hai." Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he called out inwardly. However, Yi Qinghai had already disappeared. Nie Tian stared at the place where Yi Qinghai had disappeared. He could not help but frown as he began to ponder over Yi Qinghai's words. Yi Qinghai did not seem to be willing to reveal his identity. Hence, he could not meet with Nie Tian. He warned Nie Tian that he must become the king of carnage. King of carnage. Nie Tian had heard of this name before from the Black Lotus envoy. People who possessed the carnage mandate were called the Hand of Carnage. And the Hand of Carnage had the qualifications to participate in the path of carnage. Only by walking out of the path of carnage could one become the king of carnage. The Black Lotus envoy even said that after becoming the king of carnage, one would have the qualifications to join the Black Lotus. Yi Qinghai told Nie Tian that he must become the king of carnage. Just what did this mean? Nie Tian pondered hard. He guessed that Yi Qinghai must have discovered something. Hence, he could not meet with him. Just what did Elder Hai discover? Nie Tian's eyes flickered. Then, his expression changed. He cried out in his heart, could it be that Elder Hai discovered Father's whereabouts? The more he thought about it, the more Nie Tian felt that it was possible. If Yi Qinghai didn't want to show himself and meet with Nie Tian, then the only possibility was that he had found some clues about Nie Fenghua, but had no way of confirming them. Nie Tian nodded. "I don't care about that for now. Since Elder Hai wants me to become the king of carnage, then I'll just participate in the path of carnage." He had originally come to the domain of darkness to find Ghost Warrior Wild Sand. Never could he have imagined that he would run into Yi Qinghai here. At that point, Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan arrived at Nie Tian's side. Gui Wushan's expression was one of shock. "Nie Tian, that guy is so scary. Who is he?" "I don't know him," Nie Tian said, shaking his head. He didn't mention Yi Qinghai's name. "He killed dozens of four-eyed berserk apes with a single palm strike. He's definitely a peak paramount god." Jian Jingyun was also shocked. He frowned and said, "He doesn't know us. Why would he help us?" Nie Tian took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Let's not worry about him for now. Let's enter the city first." With that, Nie Tian's figure flickered, and he took a step forward. Staring at Liang Shun and the others, he said in a cold voice, "Are you still not going to open the city gates?" Liang Shun and the others were dumbfounded. It took them a while to react. "Open, open. We'll open the gates immediately." One of the guards was drenched in cold sweat. He nodded repeatedly, turned around, and pulled the switch on the city gate. The heavy gate slowly opened, and a passage appeared above the city's grand spell formation. The sudden appearance of the black-robed cultivator shocked all the guards. Now that they reacted, how could they dare to stop Nie Tian and the others from entering the city? Liang Shun stood there in a daze. The horn of carnage in his hand trembled twice, but he still managed to muster the courage. He was afraid that if he blew the horn of carnage, it would attract the black-robed cultivator. Nie Tian took a step forward and entered the passage, landing on the city wall. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan followed closely behind Nie Tian and also arrived on the city wall. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to enter the city. His eyes were fixed on Liang Shun, and he walked forward step by step. With every step he took, the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. What do you want? Liang Shun could feel Nie Tian's killing intent. His teeth were chattering, and he couldn't speak properly. His forehead was drenched in cold sweat, and his face was as pale as paper. What do you think? Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes were cold and austere. Nie Tian wasn't a bloodthirsty person, but he wasn't a pushover either. Chapter 1821. Nie Tian took a step forward, the killing intent in his eyes sharp to the extreme. But just at this moment a sudden change occurred. Stop! A low voice suddenly rang out, following which a figure landed on the city wall like a specter, descending from the sky. Nie Tian couldn't help frowning when he heard the voice behind him. Turning around, he saw a black-clothed man standing there like a ghost. His figure was thin and shriveled, and his aged face was like a skeleton. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, astonishment on his face. He hadn't sensed this person's existence just now. Old Hai said someone came just now. Could it be this person? Nie Tian thought to himself, his heart sinking. Yi Qinghai had left in a hurry just now, obviously to avoid someone. Nie Tian guessed that the person Yi Qinghai was avoiding was the person in front of him. The reason Yi Qinghai avoided this person wasn't because he was afraid, but because he was worried that the other party would recognize him. The black-clothed man's arrival immediately caused the atmosphere to become oppressive. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him, but no one knew who he was. Even Liang Shun and the other Slaughter City guards didn't know who this black-clothed man was. Who are you? Nie Tian forced himself to calm down, staring at the black-clothed man without the slightest fear. Yi Qinghai had long since known that this person would come, so he had directly left. Therefore, it was impossible for this person to kill Nie Tian, otherwise Yi Qinghai absolutely wouldn't have left. The black-clothed man glared venomously at Nie Tian, his complexion extremely unsightly as he inwardly said, "Old Nine died at this brat's hands." The Old Nine he spoke of was none other than the Nine Lotus Lord who had just died at Nie Tian's hands, and his identity was the head of the 12 Lotus Lords. Nie Tian had killed the 9 Lotus Lord, so the head of the Lotus Lord's hatred towards Nie Tian could be imagined. He wished that he could flay Nie Tian's skin, pull out his tendons, and dismember his corpse into 10,000 pieces. However, he didn't dare to do so, because the Black Lotus King had given the order that Nie Tian couldn't die, and Nie Tian had to participate in the path of slaughter. The Lotus Head could not understand. First, the Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nie Tian. Then, after Nie Tian killed the 9 Lotus Lord, the Black Lotus King actually did not want Nie Tian to die. This was too strange. Although he felt strange, he did not dare to disobey the Black Lotus King's order. Therefore, the Lotus Head did not appear here to kill Nie Tian, but to confirm that the latter was still alive. "You don't need to know my identity. Hand over the Black Lotus, and you can enter the city," the Lotus Head said coldly. Its voice wasn't loud, but it contained a domineering aura that couldn't be defied. Nie Tian frowned slightly and his face turned gloomy. This person first stopped him from killing Liang Shun, then tried to take away the Black Lotus from him. He was truly arrogant and overbearing. At the same time, Nie Tian sensed that the Lotus Head was intending to kill him. However, it was suppressing its killing intent, as if it was afraid of making a move. The Lotus Head's attitude was very strange, and it puzzled Nie Tian. "If I wanted to enter the city, I would have done so long ago." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He stared at the Lotus Head with a playful look and said, "Before I enter the city, I have something to do." "You still want to kill him?" The Lotus Head suddenly froze, and a trace of surprise appeared on its face. It then fixed its gaze on Liang Shun. The Lotus Head was very surprised by Nie Tian's performance. No greater god had ever been able to remain so calm in front of him. Nie Tian's strong temperament had exceeded the Lotus Head's expectations. What the Lotus Head didn't know was that Nie Tian had already noticed that the Lotus Head didn't dare to do anything to him. That was why he was so insistent. Yes. Nie Tian nodded and stared coldly at Liang Shun. He said in a deep voice, "This person has tried to kill me time and again. How can I let him live?" Liang Shun sensed the killing intent from Nie Tian. He then looked at the Lotus Head and knelt down. He begged, "Your Excellency, I know I was wrong. Please save my life." Liang Shun was smart. Although he didn't know who the Lotus Head was, he could tell that it was definitely a big shot. As long as the Lotus Head was willing, it could definitely save his life. Useless. The Lotus Head suddenly turned to look at Liang Shun. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in its eyes, and then a powerful aura enveloped Liang Shun. Bang! There was a muffled sound in the air. Before Liang Shun could react, he exploded into a pool of blood and died on the spot. This! Everyone gasped in astonishment as they stared at the head of the lotus in astonishment. No one had thought that the Lotus Head would kill Liang Shun directly. Nie Tian was also stunned. He couldn't help but furrow his brows. Actually, he was just testing the Lotus Head. It didn't matter to him whether he killed Liang Shun or not. He just wanted to see the Lotus Head's reaction. The Lotus Head killing Liang Shun was out of Nie Tian's expectation. Also, the Lotus Head had called Liang Shun useless. It was as if it was blaming Liang Shun for not being able to kill Nie Tian. "I have already killed the person you wanted to kill. Now hand over the Black Lotus." The Lotus Head stared at Nie Tian and said coldly. The Black Lotus King had given the order. Therefore, the Lotus Head wouldn't kill Nie Tian. However, it must get the Black Lotus back. Nie Tian frowned. This was the first time he met the Lotus Head. How did the latter know that he had the Black Lotus? Since the Lotus Head wanted to get the Black Lotus back, it undoubtedly meant that it was one of the 12 Lotus Masters. Nie Tian sensed the Lotus Head's aura. It was much stronger than the previous Lotus Master. It was obvious that it was a more terrifying character. "I do have the Black Lotus." Nie Tian became cold. He smiled and said, "I can hand the Black Lotus to you. However, I want to know, what is your relationship with the Lotus Master who killed me?" The Lotus Head's eyes suddenly narrowed. The murderous intent in its eyes intensified. However, it disappeared in a flash. It then calmed down and said, "I will say it again. Hand over the Black Lotus." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He had no intention of handing over the Black Lotus. Instead, he smiled coldly and said, "Do you know? The Lotus Master died a horrible death. I used the power of the runes to shatter all the meridians in his body. I also devoured his consciousness bit by bit. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. After telling me some things, he self-destructed." "Shut up." As soon as Nie Tian finished speaking, the Lotus Head's expression suddenly changed. It roared, "Ninth brother would never tell you anything." "Ninth brother?" Nie Tian's eyes flickered. A strange light flashed in them. He said, "So the Lotus Master was the 9th Lotus Master. It seems that you are also one of the 12 Lotus Masters. Judging from your strength, you should be the leader of the 12 Lotus Masters, right?" The Lotus Head was stunned. It immediately realized that it had been tricked by Nie Tian. The reason why Nie Tian had said those words just now was to infuriate him, and force him to tell him something. The Lotus Head had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. It had weathered countless storms and seen countless people. It never expected that it would be tricked by a little kid today. Chapter 1822. Boom! The Lotus Head flew into a rage and instantly lost control. A violent aura pressed down on Nie Tian, and an unparalleled force enveloped him. Nie Tian immediately felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. Nie Tian's body sank slightly. His body was almost bent by the terrifying aura. His eyes were bloodshot and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He had not expected the lotus head to be so impulsive and actually attack him. He had not used the 3 forbidden techniques and was only a mid-high god. It was rather difficult for him to forcefully resist the aura of a late paramount god. Nia Tian. This sudden scene caused Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan to cry out in shock at the same time. Both of their faces turned aghast. Their cries were like thunder in the lotus head's ears. The latter's eyes narrowed before he calmed down and immediately dispersed his aura. The pressure around Nia Tian immediately disappeared. He took a few steps back and trembled. He vomited a mouthful of blood and his face immediately became much better. Nia Tian stabilized his body and looked up at the lotus head. There was no fear in his eyes at all. Instead, there was a playful expression. The lotus head's expression flickered as it looked at Nia Tian, and a hint of apprehension could even be sensed in its eyes. It had been too impulsive earlier. It had actually lost control of its emotions. The lotus head was shocked. It had faced countless opponents in the past. There were even some that were stronger than it, but it had been able to deal with them easily. Why would it be angered by a few words from Nia Tian? What astonished him even more was that Nia Tian had actually withstood the pressure he had unleashed with all his might just now. With its strength, even a late overgod would not be able to withstand its pressure. Liang Shun was an example of that. Nia Tian was only a mid-high god. How could his martial body be so powerful? All of this had far exceeded the lotus head's expectations. However, it was fortunate that Nia Tian's martial body was powerful. If he had really died, the lotus head would be in great trouble. In the Black Lotus domain, the Black Lotus King was a supreme existence. Disobeying the orders of the Black Lotus King would only result in a single outcome: death. If Nia Tian had died just now, the lotus head would not have survived either. Looks like my guess was right. You are indeed the leader of the 12 Lotus Lord. Nia Tian wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. His complexion had completely returned to normal. He smiled faintly, a playful and provocative look in his eyes. Needless to say, Nia Tian was indeed very impressive. With just a few simple words, he was able to find out the identity of the lotus head. Everyone else was stunned. Who would have thought that Nia Tian could remain so calm in the face of someone far stronger than him? The lotus head was suppressing a ball of anger in his heart that he couldn't swallow or spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. With a gloomy expression, he said in a deep voice, "Brat, are you really not afraid of death? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you?" Nia Tian faintly smiled as he stared at the two of them. With a provocative expression, he said, "Do you dare?" "You!" The lotus head was stunned. His face suddenly changed. He felt as if his blood was flowing in reverse, and his entire body was about to explode. Nia Tian's intelligence had exceeded his expectations. He could actually tell that the lotus head did not dare to kill him. It was precisely because he was sure of this that Nia Tian dared to be so arrogant. "I'm guessing that someone must have told me that you can't kill me now, so you don't dare to do it." Nia Tian faintly smiled and said, "I killed the Lord of the Lotus Lord. You are very close to him, right? I'm standing right in front of you, but you can't avenge the Lord of the Lotus Lord. That must be a very uncomfortable feeling, right? You little brat, you." Puff! The lotus head stared at Nia Tian with a fiery gaze. His teeth were chattering, and he was so angry that his blood was boiling. In the end, he was so angry that he vomited blood. Nia Tian was too arrogant, too insolent, too hateful. The lotus head stared at Nia Tian viciously, but he didn't dare to do anything. The Black Lotus King's words were still ringing in his ears, and he couldn't disobey. At this moment, everyone was stunned, and their faces were stiff and filled with shock. A dignified late-stage paramount god was actually so angry that he vomited blood because of a few words from Nia Tian. This was too miraculous. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuxian were watching from the side, baffled. Only now did they realize that Nye Tian was not only strong in battle, but also a monstrous talker. Nye Tian looked at the lotus head, but he didn't intend to stop there. He smiled and said, "If I'm not mistaken, the person who ordered you not to kill me was the Black Lotus King, right?" The Black Lotus King's pupils shrank when he heard Nye Tian's name. His body trembled, and he vomited another mouthful of blood. He never imagined that Nye Tian would be able to guess the Black Lotus King's identity. Nye Tian couldn't help but smile when he saw the lotus head's reaction. "It seems I guessed it right again." But then, Nye Tian's face sank and his eyes turned somber. He stared at the lotus head and said, "Why does the Black Lotus King want to kill me?" The lotus head's face changed again, and he involuntarily took several steps back, as if he was a little afraid of Nye Tian. Nye Tian was too shrewd, and his thoughts were like needles. The lotus head's eyes trembled, and he didn't dare to speak again. "You don't want to say it?" The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "Then I'll tell you. The Black Lotus King wants to kill me because I have the fiend god nascent embryo." The lotus head's face stiffened, and his whole body stiffened. He subconsciously swallowed, and his eyes trembled violently. The fiend god nascent embryo. The Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nye Tian because Nye Tian had the fiend god nascent embryo. Right now, Nye Tian's expression was very complicated. Judging from the lotus head's reaction, the Black Lotus King wanted to kill him because of the fiend god nascent embryo. But Nye Tian couldn't understand why the Black Lotus King knew about the fiend god nascent embryo. There were very few people who knew the secret of Nye Tian's fiend god nascent embryo. Other than the people of the Holy Parliament, there were also Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others. However, these people didn't seem to have anything to do with the Black Lotus King. What was even stranger was that the 9 Lotus King appeared as soon as Nye Tian and the others entered the dark mountain range. He seemed to be waiting for them there. Nye Tian guessed that the Black Lotus King might have a special method to sense the fiend god nascent embryo. There was also something else that was very strange. The Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nye Tian first, but now he changed his mind. It was very strange. Nye Tian couldn't understand a single one of these questions. Judging from the lotus head's shocked reaction, he didn't know anything either. Nye Tian thought for a moment. There was no point in continuing to argue with the lotus head. He flipped his hand, and a black lotus appeared in his palm. He tossed it to the lotus head and said, "The black lotus you wanted, it's yours." The lotus head was stunned, its face full of confusion. It didn't think that Nye Tian would obediently hand over the black lotus. Of course, Nye Tian didn't want to hand over the black lotus, but he knew that the lotus head wouldn't let him go if he didn't hand over something after toying with it for so long. He didn't want to argue with the lotus head, so he handed it over. Nye Tian turned around and left, but he stopped after taking 2 steps. He said indifferently, "This is the lotus head. The Black Lotus King definitely doesn't want anyone else to know about the fiend god nascent embryo. I'll leave these guards for you to kill." After saying this, Nye Tian's figure flashed and he left. Chapter 1823. Nye Tian's group of 3 landed in the middle of the city. A moment later, pleading sounds came from behind them, followed by miserable screams. "The head of the 12 lotus heads is just an idiot." Nye Tian turned his head back and saw that the lotus head had really finished off those guards. He couldn't help sneering inwardly. Everything was going according to his plan. Although the lotus head hadn't said anything, Nye Tian was able to confirm many things from him. But at this time, there were more and more riddles lingering in Nye Tian's heart. He couldn't figure it out, so he could only give up for now. To him, the most important matter right now was the slaughter path. Yi Qinghai definitely had his reasons for making him the Slaughter King. Nye Tian wouldn't disappoint Yi Qinghai. Is this Slaughter City? It's no different from the outside? Gui Wutsan couldn't help frowning as he looked around as Nye Tian's group of 3 walked on the main street. Nie Tian also noticed this point and felt it was a little strange. From the outside, Slaughter City looked extremely gloomy and gloomy. But upon entering, they discovered that this place was no different from the outside cities. The streets were filled with people, and there were restaurants and all kinds of shops along the way. Moreover, Nie Tian also discovered that there were no blood fiend runes in Slaughter City. From what he could see, there was no difference between Slaughter City and the outside cities. If he had to find a difference, it would be that the martial artists here all had sinister expressions, and the hostility between them was very thick. Nie Tian was a little curious. Just where did these people of Slaughter City come from? He could sense that there were quite a few people in the crowd like them who had the slaughter writ on them. But the majority of them were normal people. Perhaps Slaughter City is an ancient city, and the residents here used to live here, guessed Nie Tian, not taking it to heart. Nie Tian, where are we going now? Gui Wukan was slightly excited as he asked, muttering to himself, I wonder if teacher will be here? Let's take a look around first and wait for the path of massacre to open. Nie Tian faintly smiled. He naturally hadn't forgotten that the most important matter in coming to Slaughter City this time was to find the ghost Marshal Wild Sand. However, it was not easy to find a person without any clues. Nie Tian didn't have a good idea either. He could only take it one step at a time. As for how to start the path of massacre, Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry. In any case, he had the kill order in his hands, so the people of Black Lotus would take the initiative to find him. Nie Tian followed the crowd and walked forward. At this moment, he felt something. He suddenly turned around and saw two black-clothed martial artists walking towards them. Come with us, the two black-clad cultivators said coldly as they arrived before Nie Tian and the others. Then, they walked forward. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled into a faint smile. These two people were clearly from the Black Lotus sect. Nie Tian nodded towards Jian Jingyun and Gui Wucan, and followed the two black-clothed men. A while later, Nie Tian and the others arrived in a remote area under the lead of the two black-clothed martial artists. A huge square appeared before them. Many people had gathered in the square. Something seemed to have happened. Nie Tian looked over. There were two huge stone pillars erected in the square. They were several hundred meters tall, and a person stood on each pillar. The two of them were facing each other. They were actually fighting. They're fighting! Nie Tian frowned. He then discovered that there were many black-clothed martial artists standing guard outside the square. These people were not weak. Most of them were peak-over gods. At the same time, Nie Tian discovered that all the people in the square possessed the kill order. With a rough estimate, there were several tens of thousands of people. Nie Tian had never thought that there would be so many people with the kill order. In the air above the square, there was an azure-robed old man watching the battle. Nie Tian's eyes locked onto the azure-robed old man. He sent out his divine sense, and couldn't help but tremble. The old man was actually a late-over god. He immediately understood that the azure-robed old man was the judge of the battle. What are they doing? Nie Tian frowned. He didn't understand. However, the two black-clothed martial artists beside him didn't say anything. They just watched the battle in the air. Nie Tian frowned, but he wasn't in a hurry. He just watched the battle in front of him quietly. The two martial artists were both late-over gods. They weren't weak. Their auras surged and filled the air. Even space seemed to tighten. At this moment, the two martial artists moved. They attacked at the same time. Two huge palms collided. The void trembled slightly, and there was a huge explosion. Terrifying energy filled the air. Bang! Immediately after, a muffled sound rang out as a silhouette was sent flying backwards. The silhouette paused in mid-air, as though it had collided with something. Next, the air trembled as a strange power gushed forth, directly smashing that cultivator's body into smithereens. The air was drenched in blood. Gasp! The crowd gasped when they saw this. They had no idea what was going on. Nietian frowned. He activated the holographic divine glyph and sent out his divine sense. He immediately discovered something fishy. There was a terrifying kill order in the square. The cultivator who was sent flying just now had touched the killing array and triggered the activation of the killing array, causing him to die a miserable death. This is the slaughterhouse. At this time, the black-clothed man next to Nietian spoke up. The winner of the slaughterhouse lives, and the loser dies. The slaughterhouse? Nietian frowned and his expression darkened. After the slaughtering hand entered the slaughtering arena, there were only two outcomes, victory or death. After calming down, Nietian asked in a deep voice, "What's the use of the killing fields? There must be a reason why the slaughterhouse entered the slaughterhouse and fought to the death. It's used to determine the qualifications and strength of the slaughterhouse," the black-clothed man said. The slaughterhouse, only those who win 3 battles in a row in the slaughterhouse are qualified to enter the path of massacres. Nietian's eyes narrowed. So, even with the slaughterhouse, he still couldn't enter the path of massacres. He had to win 3 battles in a row in the slaughterhouse. Does that mean that after I win 3 battles in a row, I can directly enter the path of massacres? Nietian glanced at the black-clothed man and asked again. Yes. The black-clothed man nodded and said, "The path of massacres is open at any time. As long as you have the strength, you can directly enter. And the earlier you enter, the more advantages you have. But let me give you a piece of advice. Don't enter the slaughterhouse so casually. Observe for a few days first." Many people, the first time they came to the slaughterhouse, they immediately started fighting. They wanted to enter the path of massacres earlier. But the majority of them ended up dying in the slaughterhouse. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He finally understood now. The so-called slaughterhouse was actually an elimination round before entering the path of massacres. But this elimination round was very cruel. Most people would die in the slaughterhouse and have no chance to enter the path of massacres. What if I don't participate in the slaughterhouse? At this time, Nietian's eyes flickered and he asked. Chapter 1824. Nietian looked at the black-clothed man before him and frowned slightly. The people of Black Lotus really did have some tricks up their sleeve. They were extremely insidious. Hands of slaughter like Nietian would be directly taken to the field of slaughter as soon as they arrived in Slaughter City. They had 5 days to either die in the field of slaughter or emerge victorious in the field of slaughter and gain the right to enter the path of slaughter. If they did nothing in the 5 days, the people of Black Lotus would personally take action, and they would still die. Upon hearing the words of the black-clothed man, Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan sucked in a mouthful of cold air. From the looks of it, from the moment they had entered Slaughter City, they had stepped onto a path of no return, and could only walk on it till the end. Watch carefully. The black-clothed man glanced past Nietian coldly before turning around and leaving in search of other hands of slaughter. Nietian became cold and smiled faintly. There were still 5 days, so he was in no hurry. It was not a bad idea to watch the others fight first. At this moment, another person entered the field of slaughter to challenge the person who had just won. The challenger was also a late overgod. The two of them clashed several times before one of them was slammed into the killing formations around the field of slaughter by a palm strike from the other. He died on the spot. Afterwards, Nietian watched for quite a while and discovered that most of the cultivators were overgods. Late overgods were already very powerful, and there were very few peak overgods. There were even fewer overgods. Nietian, let's go. Gui Wuchan said softly as he grew rather impatient. There's no hurry. Let's wait a little longer. Nietian waved his hand slightly and glanced around. He pointed at a few people and said, "Those guys are all overgods. They haven't gone up yet." Nietian had already secretly sensed all the tens of thousands of hands of slaughter when he was watching the battle earlier. Of the tens of thousands of warriors present, there were less than 10 who were early paramount gods, and one of them was a mid-paramount god. That made him the strongest of the group. Nye Tian was a little worried that these paramount god martial artists hadn't made a move yet. As long as he didn't run into the mid-paramount god, he was completely confident in his chances. However, Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan were slightly weaker. If they were to encounter a supreme god, it would be a little dangerous. The killing arena was a battle of life and death. There was no such thing as admitting defeat. Defeat meant death. Therefore, Nye Tian had to be cautious. There's still one more. Hurry up and die. At this moment, the victorious cultivator on the stone pillar in the middle of the slaughtering ground laughed arrogantly. His face was filled with provocation as he shouted. This person was a late overgod. He had already won 2 battles, so he only needed one more to gain the right to enter the path of slaughter. A mere ant dares to be so arrogant? Before that person finished speaking, a deep voice rang out. A figure flew through the air and stepped onto another stone pillar. Rumble! When the silhouette of that person landed, the huge stone pillar shook violently, sinking several meters into the ground. The entire killing field shook violently because of this, and after that, a sharp aura spread out, surging throughout the entire killing field. What a powerful aura! Everyone could feel the cold aura rushing towards them. Their eyes were filled with fear. This person's aura was extremely powerful. It was on a completely different level compared to the other slaughtering hand. It was simply too much stronger. It's him. Nye Tian frowned slightly. The person who had appeared in the slaughtering ground was the mid-overgod he had been paying attention to. He's... Almost at the same time, Jian Jingyun suddenly cried out. He couldn't finish his sentence. Nye Tian and Gui Wuchan were stunned at the same time. They looked at Jian Jingyun and said, "You know him?" Jian Jingyun's face was filled with astonishment. He had never thought that he would meet this person here. After a few seconds, Jian Jingyun's expression calmed down. He took a deep breath and said, "His name is Nangong Ju. He's from the Nangong family." The Nangong family? Nye Tian was slightly stunned. He immediately thought of someone. The vice-chairman of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu. Nye Tian's eyes darkened. He asked, "What's the relationship between this person and Nangong Duxiu?" Jian Jingyun looked at Nye Tian and was stunned. He didn't think that Nye Tian would know Nangong Duxiu, and even call her by name. There was even a trace of anger in his eyes. Nangong Duxiu was the vice-chairman of the Holy Assembly. He was a peak overgod. In the 9 major realms, he was definitely one of the top 10 experts. His status was even higher than the patriarchs of the 9 major clans. But Nye Tian didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Nangong Duxiu. In fact, he even felt some resentment towards him. This surprised Jian Jingyun a little. How could Jian Jingyun have known that Nye Tian not only knew of Nangong Duxiu, but that he had even fought with him? Back in the God-shepherding domain, the Holy Assembly had threatened Nye Tian and threatened to kill Mo Rushi and the child in her womb. That had put Nye Tian in a situation where he was certain to die. If the inescapable net hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The enmity between Nye Tian and Nangong Duxiu was irreconcilable. How could he show respect to her? Jian Jingyun was curious, but he didn't ask too many questions. He said, "Nangong Ju is a genius of the Nangong family's new generation. He's the son of the Nangong clan's patriarch, Nangong Duo. Nangong Duxiu is his second uncle, a genius of the new generation." After knowing Nangong Ju's identity, Nye Tian couldn't help but sneer as he stared at the latter with a dark gaze. Nye Tian guessed that Nangong Ju was around 50,000 years old. For him to reach the mid-paramount god level at such a young age was indeed terrifying. However, Nangong Ju's talent in the martial path was much weaker than Nye Tian's 6th uncle, Nye Feiyu. Nye Feiyu was only a few thousand years old, but he was already the strongest overgod. When Nye Tian first met Nye Feiyu, The latter had already shown signs of advancing to the paramount god level. Nye Tian reckoned that he was already an early paramount god. If Nye Feiyu was given tens of thousands of years, he might not be able to reach the peak of the paramount god level, but he could easily reach the late paramount god level. Nangong Ju's age should be around the same as Nye Tian's father, Nye Fenghua. However, his strength was far inferior to Nye Fenghua. Regardless, Nangong Ju was still a genius. His strength could not be underestimated. At the very least, Nye Tian was currently weaker than him. Yes. Jian Jingyun nodded his head slightly. He had a shocked expression on his face as he said, "I didn't expect Nangong Ju to come here. I've long heard that Nangong Ju is a cold and arrogant person who looks down on everyone. It seems like it's true." At that moment, the green-clothed old man in the sky looked at Nangong Ju and his face couldn't help but change. He thought to himself, "This person's strength is so strong. Looks like the king of massacre in this path of massacre will definitely be this person." In the slaughterhouse, the martial artist who was fighting against Nangong Ju had a face as pale as paper. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Nangong Ju was too strong. There was no way this martial artist could contend against him. The martial artist's intestines were green with regret. A moment of insolence had caused him to provoke such a powerful person. Diant. At this moment, Nangong Ju's expression turned cold. His body swayed slightly, and a sharp aura whizzed out towards the martial artist. Chapter 1825. Seeing the scene in the killing field, the onlookers all took in a deep breath, and their eyes trembled uncontrollably. Not only was Nangong Ju powerful, he was also ruthless. He did not give his opponent any chance at all. Nye Tian stared at Nangong Ju and his face darkened slightly. Nangong Ju's eyes were extremely cold, as if he did not kill a human, but an ant. Without a doubt, not only was Nangong Ju arrogant, but he was also ruthless and bloodthirsty. After killing his opponent, Nangong Ju glanced across the crowd coldly. He said coldly, "Who else wants to die?" His arrogant voice resounded across the entire place. The entire killing field was dead silent. No one dared to speak. Whoever dared to go up now was seeking death. Nangong Ju's strength suppressed everyone. "A bunch of ants. You don't even have the courage to go up?" Nangong Ju spoke again. He glanced across the crowd coldly. He was extremely arrogant. The crowd fell into an even deeper silence. The atmosphere was suffocating. "Sir, since no one dares to challenge you, you can go up now." At this moment the old man in the sky spoke. "Although you did not win 3 rounds, your strength is beyond doubt. You have the right to enter the path of slaughter." The old man's words were very clear. He wanted Nangong Ju to enter the path of slaughter. Nangong Ju raised his head and glanced at the old man. However, his lips curled into a cold smile. Then, his silhouette flickered and he leaped into the air. His cold gaze glanced around and he spoke in a low voice. "How can the rules of the slaughterhouse be changed so easily? Since nobody dares to step up, then I will personally choose my opponent." As soon as Nangong Ju finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. Many people paled in fright. The old man was stunned. He never thought that Nangong Ju would be so ruthless. He wanted to kill 3 people no matter what. At this moment, Nangong Ju's eyes locked onto an overgod. Then, he suddenly moved and slapped down with his palm. A sharp force whistled out and struck the ground. Everyone felt the violent force and they all dodged. However, there were still many people who could not dodge it in time. Boom! The violent palm shadow fell and the ground shook. Dozens of martial artists died on the spot. Everyone was stunned by the sudden turn of events, and their expressions turned into one of terror. Nangong Ju was too ruthless. He viewed human lives as grass and killed whenever he wanted to. The green-clothed old man frowned and his expression was obviously not too good. However, he still shook his head, looked at Nangong Ju and said, "Sir, you have already killed 3 people. Can you stop now?" The corner of Nangong Ju's mouth twitched. He coldly laughed and said, "Of course not. I only wanted to kill 1 person with that palm strike just now. The others are merely cannon fodder that lies down and dies." "You!" The green-clothed elderly's face darkened. He didn't expect that Nangong Ju would still not stop. Nangong Ju didn't care about the elder's reaction at all. His gaze was heavy as he scanned the entire place, after which, his gaze locked onto 1 person. The corner of his mouth slightly moved as he mumbled, "You must be from the Jian clan. The next person to die will be you." The eyes of the person who was stared at by Nangong Ju trembled and his expression changed. He cried out in shock, "Nangong Ju recognized me." The person who was locked onto by Nangong Ju was none other than Jian Jingyun. Jian Jingyun knew Nangong Ju and the latter also had some impression of him. Nangong Ju actually wanted to kill Jian Jingyun. Nye Tian suddenly froze. He felt that something was wrong. He immediately looked at Jian Jingyun and said in a deep voice, "Calm down." Hearing Nye Tian's voice, Jian Jingyun's frightened expression darkened. His gaze became much more determined. "Ant, die!" Nangong Ju roared and once again slammed his palm down. The surging palm shadows were like thunder from the 9th heaven and fiercely pressed towards Jian Jingyun's location. Boom! In an instant, a loud explosion sounded in the sky. The space trembled as if it was going to collapse. "Jian Jingyun, Gui Wuchan, let's attack together." Nye Tian looked at the mountain-like palm shadows in the sky and roared. After which, frightening black symbols surged from his body and the aura around his body continued to increase. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wuchan looked at each other. After which, their gazes became firm and the aura around their bodies surged. At this moment, the green-robed old man looked at Nye Tian and the other 2 and couldn't help but be shocked. He thought to himself, what are they trying to do? Could it be that they want to take an attack from a mid-stage paramount god? From the green-robed old man's point of view, what Nye Tian and the other 2 were doing was no different from seeking death. 2 peak over-gods and a mid-stage high god. Trying to take an attack from a mid-stage paramount god was simply courting death. What are those black symbols on that kid's body? But in the next moment, the green-robed old man sensed something and frowned slightly. Boom! 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 At the same time, 3 sword shadows soared into the sky. A violent sword aura blossomed in the sky. The sword light shot out for tens of thousands of meters, and the sword intent filled the space within 10,000 meters. The 3 sword shadows, like 3 giant dragons, rose against the wind, the sword intent surging. When the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect Nye Tian and the other 2 to be so strong. "You want to fight against me with this level of strength? Ridiculous!" Nangong Ju sneered in the sky. He didn't care about the attack from Nye Tian and the other 2 at all. But at this moment a strange scene happened. The 3 sword shadows in the air suddenly exploded and fused together, forming a gigantic sword shadow that was 10,000 meters long. Instantly, a terrifying sword intent permeated the air. The sharpness of the sword intent seemed to be able to tear apart the heavens and earth. Boom! In the air, the shadow of the palm and the shadow of the sword finally collided. A thunderous sound rang out, resounding throughout the space. Instantly, billowing waves of energy spread out in all directions, wreaking havoc in the air. Chi-chi-chi. Crack. Ear-piercing sounds rang out continuously. Then, there was a loud sound. The crowd saw that the palm shadow couldn't withstand the power of the sword shadow, and a crack appeared on it. Then, the palm shadow shattered. Boom! The sword shadow broke through everything. Like a rainbow, it headed straight for Nangong Ju. Nangong Ju was surprised. Then, a long black spear appeared in his hand and he stabbed forward. The spear shadow was like a dragon, and it shattered the sword's shadow in front of him. Once again, the scene fell into dead silence. Everyone's gaze moved between Nangong Ju and Nye Tian. Their faces were filled with shock, and they couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Nye Tian and the other two joined forces, and not only did they block Nangong Ju's attack, they even almost injured him. This was too terrifying. It exceeded everyone's imagination. At this moment, the elder in green was also stunned. His face tightened and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He originally thought that Nye Tian and the other two would definitely die. But the result was that Nye Tian and the other two fought against Nangong Ju and even had a slight advantage. Nye Tian and the other two were all swordsmen. Plus, they had fought together before and they had great chemistry with each other. After fusing their sword intent, the power of their sword intent far exceeded their individual strength. That was why they could fight against Nangong Ju head-on. One has to say that Nangong Ju was too careless. He didn't use his full strength in the attack just now.